I'm an infectious disease specialist, trauma surgeon. I have 6 degrees, BS in microbiology and chemistry, master's in cellular and molecular genetics, 2 doctorate degrees. I'm one of 1% of the people on the planet certified in chemical and biological warfare by the U.S. Army. I teach virology in Germany. I do research in infectious disease and oncology. Spent 30 years in the jungles, deal with everything from Ebola, malaria, dengue. I put babies in body bags, and I've done vaccination programs to make the communities better in the most poorest places on the planet. And I told people back in 2020, you folks will be getting 500 booster shots for the next 100 years.
Yes, you did.
And sure enough, you guys are getting booster shots and all the other things that comes negative with that. And it was offensive. At the beginning of the pandemic, me and Fauci were supposed to do an interview together.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Dr. Rowland, you got 6 degrees. Fauci has 2. First question I was asked Fauci was, show me in the book Virology and explain to me what an RNA virus is.
Come on.
Okay, everybody, give a round of applause to our brother, Dr. Lane Rowling. I don't know if you've seen that video before, but give our brother a round of applause. I'm looking at y'all. I just want you to know, I see y'all. I'm looking at Jason, I see Octavia, I see Bridget, I see Shane, I'm looking at you. Clap, y'all, clap now. I'm looking right at y'all. Brother Dr. Lane Rowling, please take yourself off of mute and introduce yourself and share some love, man. Show some love to the people who came here to hear from myself and from you about what the heck is going on in this world.
Well, I want to thank you. Can you guys hear me very well? Can you hear me very well?
I hear you on my end. Hear you clear over here.
Perfect. Well, I want to just thank you, Riz, and your staff for giving me the opportunity to be on your platform. And I think it's such a wonderful thing that we should have done this 3 years ago, because it's so important to understand diseases, and especially diseases now on a global and pandemic level, that people need to really, truly understand the information. One of the things I've always tried since in the beginning, when I got put on the COVID Healthcare Task Force for the National Black Legislator, was to be that educator, to be that person out in Mississippi, in Louisiana, in Arkansas, in Georgia, trying to educate Black folks about the COVID virus itself, and just understanding disease and how to prevent diseases, how to protect their families, and what the long-term outcome is going to be. So for me to have the opportunity to be on your platform tonight and give a class to your followers is amazing, because I do this in a university now. I teach immunology, I teach human anatomy, I teach virology. So to be able to be, for your folks to have access to a professor that teaches this on a regular basis is an honor to be able to have a class tonight on a Sunday night. And I look forward to it, because we're going to have a long ways to go. And I look forward to being able to present great information at a level that people can understand.
Absolutely. You know, we definitely appreciate all of those who stand on integrity, who risk their careers, because as you know, someone who has had to go through these institutions, you risk things when it comes to standing on principle versus pushing the line. If it's pharmaceutically sponsored, if it goes against the Hippocratic Oath, you know, it's kind of a fine line you have to walk so that you don't, I would say, put in danger your credentials, your credibility, your certifications, you name it. So for you to take that time out to really stand on the truth, and not just here on this platform, you've been doing it. You've been doing it publicly. So again, we thank you for being one of the only Black scientists. I have to highlight that for everyone who's on here, because y'all know we don't have too many of those who are Black scientists who are culturally Black and who stand on truth. So again, we appreciate you, brother, sincerely. We do. And of course, you know, when it comes to my platform, we speak the truth regardless to whom or what. Everyone knows this. The U.S. government knows this about your brother. They know.
This is the reality. And the sad thing about it is that, you know, I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I mean, I've been in the jungles for 20 years, all over the world, you know, published in Nature Microbiology magazine, doing a research for Zika. I just got back from Peru just 3 weeks ago doing a Department of Army defense project on dengue, getting samples of patients that have dengue, helping the military develop a new assay to detect different diseases in the field, in particular the dengue. And so I've been doing this for a while. The sad thing is I think the world has caught up to me, because I've been doing this, and all of a sudden when COVID came down, everybody became a COVID expert. And all of a sudden you got folks that, you know, were talking about microbiology and And I'm like, where in the hell these guys have been? I've never seen them in a chemical biological warfare lab. I've never seen them in a laboratory. I've definitely never seen them in the jungles of Peru. With me going down on a boat in the Amazon and jumping off the boat, hiking 10 miles to a village, getting bit by every mosquito in the world with every disease possible, and treat 500 people in a village. And to me, it was very offensive when you got folks like Fauci and these guys. I call it the so-called white man mentality, where people think this white man was going to be their savior, and he wasn't. And then there were a lot of black folks, you know, the Roland Martins in the world that were pimping black folks, like I say, into an ideal that wasn't right. The science wasn't right. The medicine couldn't substantiate what they were telling us, and now we'll see what's happening, where we're at today. And so my responsibility is to continue to talk about the science and the education. And you, like I said before, if you understand the science, you have to know the medicine. And for you to understand the medicine, you have to know the science, period, end of story. There's nothing to talk about.
That is a fact. And I again highlight the fact that, as you said, everybody named mama and their cousin became an expert overnight. And it was blowing my mind. I've seen people pop up out of nowhere pushing things that they don't know 2 ingredients about. And I said, I don't think you guys know what susceptibility is, what 10th grade biology is. I don't know if you know how the immune system works or the lymphatics. I mean, basic things that just were being violated. No science, no proof, no evidence of any trials whatsoever. But alas, you know, we're here. And I thank you again for being one of those who remained steadfast throughout all of it, because you were doing this publicly, just as I was, in different areas. And then we were able to meet. I think you were being interviewed on Roland Martin's show, where basically he brought you on with your 6 degrees to try to coerce black folks, you know, and say, man, you got 6 degrees, brother. Tell these black folks why they take these shots. And you did the opposite. You said, actually, I didn't take it, and neither should they. And I'll tell you why. And that was it was beautiful, because I said, wow, we have a real scientist out here standing on integrity. And I said, I have to get in touch with this brother. I have to, you know. So again, we appreciate you. Right before we do the presentation, everyone, because we do have slides. He has presentations. He's going to go into heavy data. So I want y'all to know this really quick. Please put your thinking caps on. Be ready to receive actual data, actual science from an actual scientist. This is a free class. Do not get out here and say, no one told you the truth. Don't get out here and say, oh, no one told me, no one showed me. No, no, no. They're going to push more shots. Joe Biden has just requested funding from Congress to push another round of shots. Dr. Lane Rolling, in the clip that you just saw on the interview that I interviewed him on my podcast, he said out of his mouth, you people will be taking boosters for the next 500 years after this because of something called immuno escape, where viruses have to mutate. They have to evolve to get around these things. And that's a basic. He said it, and this is what's happening. So now people who took the shot, they'll probably be taking 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 within the next 10 years if they fall for it. So I had to just mention that, Dr. Rolling, because it was very critical and it was very accurate. So I know you want to get into your presentation, but is there anything else you want to say right before you get into that?
I think it's just very important that we lay the ground rules, is that there are no ground rules, because the truth speaks the truth. The science is the science, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. There's not going to be a spin zone. There's not going to be a narrative. At the end of the day, my sole responsibility and what I've always done is to save people's lives. You know, God put me in a position to give me the intelligence and the ability to go the distance. And I look at myself as a humble man trying to make a difference. And when I look at babies that are sick and dying, it breaks my heart. And that's what it's all about. And so from day one, it's always been about trying to save people's lives, and not a narrative or a footnote. And I have to pat myself on the back, because I didn't waver one iota bit from what I've said, from MSNBC to the Black News Channel, NPR, and all the different programs I did. And I have to give you credit to what you've gone through, because people threw you under the bus, people threw me under the bus, people threw Robert Kennedy Jr. under the bus. And now we're finding out the truth is that it was like I said on my Instagram, pixie dust in the 7 dwarfs.
That's a fact. Yes, and the fact is, everything we said is coming out. Congress is acknowledging it. As you mentioned, I think Robert Kennedy Jr., who was brought before, I think it was the Democratic subcommittee investigating this, the weaponization of social media, I believe it was, where they were talking about it, and they brought up the disinformation dozen, which included myself, and they're now suing all these different organizations that did this to us because what we said was true, and they violated our freedom of speech when what we were saying, if it would have been allowed to go on the social media platforms without being stopped, could have quite literally saved millions more lives from this thing being injected into them. And so that's why now there are multiple lawsuits taking place. For all of you who may not know that, there's an investigation currently happening into the CDC. There's an investigation by an independent law firm into the Center for Countering Digital Hate. That's the organization out of the UK that compiled the list of 12 of us, that sent it to the White House, that the 12 United States Attorney Generals came together, looked at, and brought it to Joe Biden, and looked at it and said, these 12 people have to be removed, and Facebook got brought in, and Google and Twitter. That's how it happened. So that organization is currently being under investigation right now. It's all happening because what we said was true. And it's sad that, so many people really were sacrificed and experimented on. And that's why we want to give you this information now so that you don't fall for the next wave, because it's coming. It is coming. So Dr. Lane Rowland, you know what? You go ahead, take it away. Y'all just be prepared because he's going to take it and he's going to go there. So just be ready to hear this information and be ready to apply it once you receive it.
Okay, folks. Well, folks, my name is Dr. Lane Rowland, and I'm going to guide you guys over the next several hours on the world of microbiology, infectious diseases and stuff, and try to break it down into layman terms where you can understand it. And that's one of the things that I think that God gave me the ability is to take complex material and be able to break it down to a level that the common folks can understand. Big Mama can understand, and that's the reality, because it is complex. I mean, science itself is a beautiful subject. It's very complex. There are a lot of moving parts in it. It changes all the time. But at the end of the day, the science is the science, and you have to have the pedigree. You have to have the background. It's not about boasting. The reality is the reality. I was that young Black boy that they told me that, and my mom, that I was retarded in the 6th grade, and I've overachieved that. I've gotten all the degrees I can possibly from my BS in microbiology and chemistry, my minor in military science, my master's degree in cellular molecular genetics, my 2 doctorate degrees, my surgical residency internship in Honolulu, Hawaii, my 2-year postgraduate degree in infectious diseases in Peru, in the Amazon jungle basin, with real live patients with infectious diseases, my research laboratory in Germany, my research laboratory in Little Rock, my Department of Defense research projects that I just currently finished just 3 weeks ago in Peru, developing assays to help fight diseases or detect diseases at an earlier stage. So I have a pretty broad range of experience, but when it comes down to science, I think I'm pretty good at what I do. And the reality is that as we go through these lectures, we're going to go from, we're going to talk about immunology, introduction. We're going to go through a little bit of everything. I'm going to try to break it down so when you guys leave this platform from here on out, if anybody is trying to educate you or trying to get you to drink the Kool-Aid, like I call the vaccine the Kool-Aid with no sugar, you're going to first ask them, what is their background? What is your educational fortitude? Where'd you train at? What patients have you seen? And then when you find out where people train at or what their experience is, it's going to give you a different viewpoint. It's 100%. It's like me trying to tell somebody in special forces or somebody who's Pathfinder, and I am, that, how to jump out of helicopters. That doesn't make any sense. I operate on babies that are 3 days old. Also, as part of one of my other hats I wear, I operate on babies 3 days old. It's kind of hard for somebody to tell me about operating on a 3-day-old baby with a congenital defect that's never done it before. And so from here on out, I think that you guys are going to be educated on what should have been done back in 2020. And I've said this 1,000 times. What they should have did was they should have took everybody in the world here in the United States and had that big mama conversation, like I always say, and tell people, what are we dealing with? How do we get here? How do we navigate through it? How do we get to the other side? And this is the reality. So what we're doing is that we're setting the clock back. In fact, what we're doing is we're preventing for what you guys are going to go through over the next 3 years, because the pandemic never went away. The infection now is endemic. And we're not talking about just the SARS-CoV virus as a pandemic endemic infection. We're talking about monkeypox. Now we're talking about HIV that's mutated. We're talking about malaria that's here and dengue that's here. We're talking about shingles and congenital syphilis. We're going to try to touch a little bit of that to navigate Black Americans in truly understanding infectious diseases. What I want everybody to remember is that if the government can do what they did with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, inject Black men with syphilis, study them for 40 years, withhold treatment, and their babies come out with congenital syphilis and missing brains and missing tibias, deformed, people dying, the misery. You don't think they can do that to Black folks? One of the books that I always use in my class that I teach overseas when I bring students from the United States and the world to train with me in Peru is a book called Medical Apartheid, which is a great book because it's the first book that talks about the systemic racist medical practice that they did on Black folks. And when I talk about experiments, I'm talking about brutal stuff. Alabama, Dr. Sims cutting out Black females as vaginal with anesthesia. All the lobotomies in New York City were done on Black boys that had OCD, and they were taking the ice pick and sticking it up in their brain and shaking it around. And Johnny go back to school, and then Johnny acted up again. Johnny would have another procedure on his brain. So folks, do not believe that the government is always for your best interests, because that's not the reality, because history shows that it wasn't, especially for Black folks in the United States. And I remember my grandmother used to talk about the night watchman, and people don't realize there are over 10,000 Black bodies buried under the Medical College of Georgia. And so this is our reality, guys, that we were treated as subclass citizens, not humans. We didn't feel pain. And you guys know today, if you go to a doctor, your care is a lot different versus a white doctor taking care of you versus a Black doctor taking care of you. And the reality is that we know the outcomes are completely different. This is the reality of our world. So how do we move forward? We move forward with education. We move forward with people that actually represent us and stuff, the reality of understanding diseases. And when it comes to this area of microbiology, immunology, virology, infectious diseases, I am the expert, period. It is, period. Like I was telling the famous Roland Martin, he was talking about how great he is. And I said, you couldn't be on a basketball with a Stephen Curry because you're out of breath, man. You're out of your league. And reality is that when it comes to diseases, he's out of his league dealing with diseases with me, because you don't have the pedigree. You have to have the experience. It takes many years of discipline, folks. I spent my complete 20s, from the time I was 18 to the time I was 32, all in school, studying, writing, research, surgery, taking exams, etc. So I sacrificed that part of my life to be where I'm at today. And that is a professor and an avid student of infectious diseases. So let's get started, folks, because we're going to have a great time now. Well, folks, let's talk about just diseases itself. I think one of the most important things is that when we talk about viruses, we have to understand what we're talking about is really microbiology. And when we talk about microbiology, we have different organisms that make up microbiology. We have viruses, we have fungi, we have bacteria, we have worms. And this makes up that microcosm world that we deal with every day of our lives. And the reality, folks, is that here's the deal, folks, is that microorganisms will always be here. They were here in the beginning. And so when we look at microorganisms, we have to understand there's always a symbiotic relationship where there's a competition between symbiotic relationship to what we call parasitism, where guess what, folks? It becomes the organism can be detrimental to our health. And the reality is that when we look at diseases, we're looking really at the world of microbiology. And when you're looking for information, make sure you're looking for the microbiology books, trying to get a basic microbiology book to understand viruses, understanding bacteria, understanding these different organisms. And most people don't realize that the more people have died from diseases than all the wars have been put together. Diseases have changed our world. Absolutely. People don't realize that the Roman Empire lost control because of malaria. Malaria, the Romans or the Italians were affected with the malaria parasite. They became sterile, they had fevers, and they lost their empire. People don't realize that the slave trade continued for another 400 years for one reason only, because guess what? They thought that Black people, we had some innate ability to not die in tropical areas, which the reality is that we had the disease called sickle cell. And sickle cell gave us that competitive advantage over other people where we could be in that environment with mosquitoes and malaria, and we could thrive. And that kind of extended the slave trade for many, many years. And also, when we look at the history of microbiology, we need to also understand that when Columbus came to Haiti, Dominican Republic, guess what they brought? They brought smallpox, and that wiped out the Indians on them islands. And guess what the Indians gave Columbus? Syphilis. Syphilis went from the New World back to the Old World. And the syphilis, you guys know the history of syphilis in the New World. It went crazy, changed the whole society itself. So this is just a little brief summary on why microbiology is important. And I hope that people, when we get done with this platform, that you guys are going to become more scientists. I hope that your children become interested in virology and infectious diseases and microbiology, because one of the things that we've seen over the last 3 years is that we still don't have enough minorities. And I say minorities, I'm talking about Black Americans that are in the field of infectious diseases or in virology or microbiology. We found that out. We don't have enough doctors still. And so I'm hoping that as we go through this process, that you're able to instill in your children, hey, Mommy, I want to be a virologist. Hey, I want to be whatever, an OBGYN, and that they can do it. They have the ability, and we need many, many more. So folks, let's get started on immunology, because I think immunology is very, very important for you to get the rest of what we're going to go with on these lectures. Tonight, we're going to talk about immunology. We're going to talk about virology. We're going to talk HIV. We're going to talk about coronavirus. We're going to talk about tuberculosis. We're going to talk a little bit about monkeypox, and we're going to talk about some other diseases and how you folks able to navigate through this pandemic, endemic, so you can survive. Because it is so sad now when we look at the media, and every day on Instagram, it just amazes me because I'm posting articles on, 17-year-old basketball players dropping dead on the basketball court. 23-year-old basketball players, college players dropping dead on the basketball court. We see the ramification of diseases that affect our society, and people are trying to figure it out. Well, we've already figured out. We know where it's going to go. So by giving you guys the basic tools in understanding infectious disease at a level that is fun, it's exciting, because trust me, folks, I teach immunology now, and it's a whole different level when you really get down to the integral part of the immune system. But the reality is that if I give you the basics of understanding the immune system, then you can navigate. Well, folks, immunology. What is immunology? Immunology is really the body's ability to fight infections. And when we talk about the immune system, what you folks need to understand In the basic principles of immunology, we have two parts of the immune system, one called the innate immunity and the other one, what we call the adaptive immunity or the acquired immunity. The innate immunity, folks, is our skin. It is our saliva. It is our urine. It is diarrhea. This is innate, means we're inherently born with that immune system that protects us from diseases. But we also understand that the reality is that this innate immune system only has the ability to correct or destroy or protect us for a certain amount of diseases, period. Because then we have to bring in what we call our acquired immunity, our adaptive immunity. And this is so important because the immune system is like a sympathy. It is orchestrated, it's all regulated. Every part has to play its part. If not, but guess what happens? We have disease, we have pathology, we have pathogenicity of diseases that are able to spread. And when we talk about the acquired immune system, we're talking about T cells and B cells, and T cells and B cells are going to become very important as we get further into our lectures, talking about T cells, understanding HIV, the CD4 T cells or CD8 cells. We talk about B cells, we're talking about, making antibodies and stuff on how do we fight infections and stuff. So folks, when we talk about the immune system, it is a concerted effort between the innate and the acquired immunity to have that balance to protect our bodies. I want you folks, like I always say in my class, take a note, make a box. You have the innate immunity, which is our basic, what we're born with. We have our acquired immunity, which we have through adapted or is acquired. We get exposed, regulated by our T cells and B cells. Our B cells are responsible for our antibodies, and our T cells are responsible for what we call our cellular mediated immunity. So let me repeat this again. We have the innate immunity, we have the acquired immunity, which is our B cells and T cells. T cells are responsible for making antibodies. In fact, when we make antibodies, what are antibodies? Because people talk about antibodies, and you read about antibodies in the paper, you read it in news magazines. Well, antibodies are what we call the protective immunoglobulins that are responsible for what we call extracellular infections, i.e., we have 5 antibodies that are made: IgG, IgA, IgM, IgE, and IgD. And each of these antibodies that are produced by the B cells are responsible for protecting infections or organisms outside the cell. Then we have the T cells, which is T cells are responsible for, guess what, folks? Infections inside our cells. We call that cellular mediated immunity. We have cellular mediated immunity, and we have 2 major T cells. We have CD4 cells and we have CD8 cells. And then CD4 cells are what we call our helper cells. It helps the immune system. Our CD8 cells, our killer cells, are responsible for, guess what? Helping fight cancers and intracellular parasites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these 2 entities, B cells, T cells, innate immunity, kind of make up the basic immune system. And I can go really, really deep into understanding and trying to explain to you the immune system. But for this program, the most important thing is that you need to understand we have an innate and we have an acquired immunity. Folks, here's a very important point that I want people to realize. Antibiotics that we take never, ever get rid of any infection. Your human body is responsible for getting rid of infections. That is why when an individual gets infected with a disease, it takes about 7 days for your body to make antibodies. You go from what we call, I said earlier, we have IgG, A, M, E, and D. Well, the 2 principal antibodies that we have when we get infected with a virus, doesn't matter if it's a parasite, it's a bacteria, we have a thing called IgM, which is what we call our acute antibodies. And these acute antibodies come in, they help fight infections, they kind of regulate it for about 5 to 7 days. And then what happens on day 7 to about day 10, it switches from IG, thank you very much, it switches from IgM to IgG. And folks, the IgG are long-term antibodies. But folks, here's the deal. What do they do when you take the IgG antibodies and you take IgM antibodies? Well, what really happened? Well, what they're doing, folks, is that they're programming themselves to be able to fight whatever the infection agent is in your body. It could be a fungi, it could be a virus, it could be a parasitic worm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was what makes the immune system beautiful. And as you look at this slide right here, you're absolutely correct. B cells are responsible for humoral immunity, and T cells are responsible for what we call cellular mediated immunity. So at the end of the day, the human body and the immune system has the ability to protect ourselves from parasites that are on outside the cell and also parasites that are in the cells. Let's go to the next slide. And we can get the next slide to be perfect, right? And this is what a very important slide that I want people to really focus in on, the CD4 T helper cell. This is the key to understanding HIV. And when we talk about HIV, this is a cell that the HIV virus attaches to, goes inside, lives inside the CD4 T helper cells, and over time, it is lysed. It gets destroyed over a 10, 12-year period. And so this CD4 helper T cell is very responsible for helping regulate the immune system. If you cannot regulate the immune system, the cell that is responsible for that, guess what happens? You have all types of different diseases, multitudes of opportunist infections. And that's one of the things that's pretty interesting when it comes to HIV patients. And my students have done the study where a typical HIV patient that has no CD4 cells will also have up to 20 plus different infections and stuff. And so this CD4 cell in the immune system is so very important. And you're going to see how important that is when we actually get into the HIV discussion and stuff like that. Do we have any questions right now on the basic immunology right now? Akoni, can you see if there's any questions for us?
There are a couple of questions, none that are directly related, but you did mention something about sickle cell, and there's a question on that. One moment, let me pull it up here. Okay, someone is asking, can you re-explain cell-mediated immunity?
Okay, what cell-mediated immunity, okay, when we talk about cell-mediated immunity, that means the cell that is responsible for regulating the immunity inside the cell. And that is the responsibility of the T cells themselves, the CD4 cells and the T helper cells, what we call the CD8 cells or killer cells. B cells, or humoral mediated immunity, is responsible for extracellular infections outside the cell. IgG, IgA, IgM, IgE, IgD. This is the difference between B cell humoral immunity versus cellular mediated immunity T cell. That is the simple answer. Now, to your question about sickle cell, what I was trying to alleviate earlier is that when it comes to sickle cell was a genetic mutation occurring in Africa, because in Africa, malaria was the predominant parasite that killed a lot of people. You get malaria back in the day in Africa, you died early. You're talking about 14, 10 years of age. And then over time, there was a genetic mutation in the amino acid that created sickle cell. And guess what happens? When the malaria parasite is injected in you by the mosquito, that parasite looks for a biconcave red blood cell. Well, if the red blood cell is out of shape, is sickle, the receptor is not there, the parasite cannot see it, so the parasite cannot bind it. But the reality is that what happens? Well, sickle cell is a great disease in a malaria-infested endemic country. But guess what? You're not going to live to be 40 or 50 years of age. You have time to reproduce. So malaria was a great disease that expressed through sickle cell that gave us the advantage to be able to live a lot longer. Okay. Any other questions on that? Any other questions or comment on that?
Yes, someone is asking, does the sickle cell prevent the cells from being receptive to COVID-19 virus and the spike protein?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, not at all.
All right, and then one other question, someone is saying they need help with school age vaccination for children in California.
Well, what you can do, like most people do, you can send me an email to my email. We'll put that in the chat and we can talk about it off camera and in privacy about what we can do or to make sure that your children are getting the right vaccines, because I think it's very, very important as we navigate on understanding what is the appropriate vaccines that children are getting. And then we can talk about that offline. Okay.
Thank you. And one final question, does the T cell helper help control inflammation in the human body?
Oh, no, the T suppressor cell is more in regulating the inflammation. And that's why if you ever have an imbalance between T helper and also T suppressor cells, you get uncontrolled inflammation, you can have that.
Thank you.
Okay. So now I want to switch to now virology, going to the introduction of virology, because I think this is very important. This is going to lead us into a lot of our major topics, folks. Well, folks, let me explain to you what viruses are. And viruses are unbelievable. And we look at the impacts of viruses, and we know from 1918, the Spanish flu, and most people don't realize that the Spanish flu started in China and it went on for almost 10 years. It wiped out half the population. And the reality, folks, is that viruses have always been here. When we look at microorganisms, we can look at microorganisms, and we can look at sizes. When we look at viruses, guys, viruses are so small. We're talking about down to 10 to the 6 nanometers, 10 to the 9th nanometers. We're talking about viruses so small, they're almost to the protein level. And when we look at bacteria, which are much bigger, we can look at parasites, but viruses are quite unique. I always ask my class when I teach, do viruses have a conscience? Do viruses think? And most people will jump up and go, well, viruses don't think. Well, I think by the time we get done with this lecture, you might have a different appreciation of viruses. Well, let's talk about viruses, folks, and people take note. There are really two types of viruses that we have, and viruses are based off their genetic material. We have DNA viruses, we have RNA viruses. DNA viruses are pretty stable, RNA viruses are not stable. What is important for you guys to understand as we navigate in this pandemic endemic, if you understand the virus that you're dealing with, then you can understand, kind of predict what the outcome can be. What do I mean by that? When we look at DNA and RNA viruses, folks, they have different expression. They have different effects on the human body. The reality is that when these viruses enter your cell, i.e. your nose, your eyes, your heart, these viruses have the ability to attach to your cell. And viruses themselves are what we call obligate intracellular parasites, which means that they have to be inside the cell to live. In fact, they're like zombies. And once they get inside the cell, they take over the cell. It doesn't matter if it's a CD4 cell, or if it's a heart cell, or if it's a gastrointestinal cell. At the end of the day, guys, viruses themselves take over the cells, and they're obligate intracellular parasites that live inside the cell, take over the cell. And in some viruses that take over the cells, they produce what we call 100 up to 10,000 baby viruses in that cell. And that cell ends up lysing, or that virus gets released. And then you need to understand very important two terms that we have in viruses. We have a word called lytic viruses. We have a word called lysogenic viruses. What do we mean by that? Well, lytic means what it means. A virus gets inside of the cell, it causes that cell to rupture. It pops, destroys the cell's not coming back, the cell death. Versus lysogenic virus, a virus that come inside the cell, they don't kill the cell, they live inside the cell, and they release some viruses out every once in a while. And a lot of these folks have already had that experience because you've had herpes, you've had a cold sore, maybe you have shingles, maybe you have reactivation of your Guillain-Barré syndrome or Bell's palsy. And so viruses can do one or two things to a cell. One, they can kill the cell, lytic infection, or they can keep that cell alive, lysogenic infection. And probably one of the biggest viruses that is able to keep cells alive is HIV, which over time releases viruses. And here's a question when we're talking about viruses, because I think it's important as I'm thinking about it. What is a good parasite? And word parasitism is something that we need to think about. When we look at viruses themselves can be are parasites. But here's the deal. Is a good parasite a good virus, a virus that kills everybody in a neighborhood, like Ebola in a village in Africa? Or is a good parasite one that keeps you alive over time to be able to infect more people? And when we look at the coronavirus over time, the coronavirus has really kind of mitigated itself. It kind of downgraded itself because it figured out that, hey, if I can infect more people over time versus getting people, killing people, that makes me that much more efficient in doing what I need to do. And so when we look at viruses, it's always important to understand if the virus itself is a lytic virus or a virus that's what we call a lysogenic virus that has the ability to keep the cell alive. But here's the deal, folks, when we talk about viruses themselves, the real deal. What is more important? What is more dangerous? A DNA virus or an RNA virus? RNA virus. Well, the difference, folks, is that the viruses that really causes the damage in our world are RNA viruses. And why? Because RNA viruses, by genetics, by design, they mutate all the time. Every time a virus replicates, folks, it is a mutation, it is a mutant. And so when we talk about the coronavirus, we talk about RNA viruses, creating vaccines, all that stuff. It is so difficult to be able to create a vaccine on something that mutates all the time. It's impossible. I told you folks 3 years ago that it will be 500 different booster shots. You would never, ever come with a vaccine that is going to control the coronavirus, because the coronavirus is the most mutagenic virus in the planet. And you folks need to understand, we're talking basic virology, understanding that you get infected with a virus. The virus attaches to the cell. The virus goes inside the cell. The virus hijacks the cell. The virus takes over the cell. The virus replicates in the cell. And guess what? It could do one or two things. It can release viruses over time, or it can cause cell destruction. So when we start talking about, for example, people get the coronavirus, i.e. they lose their taste, i.e. they lose their smell. Well, that virus got attached to the nose cells or to the taste cells, enters that cell, causes 50% destruction of the taste cell. You're gonna lose 50% of your ability to taste, i.e. the virus gets in your nose cells. Hey, it kills 75% of the nose cells. You're only gonna have 25%. i.e. the virus gets into your cardiac cells or your gastrointestinal cells. And you can see where this is going. That virus causes lytic death, and your hope that you're able to maintain at least 80% of your cells to be able to function. So when cells are affected with viruses, there is an acute and chronic change over time. And that is why it's so important, as we discuss this, that you guys need to make sure you understand what type of virus it is. Is it an RNA virus or is it a DNA virus? And now we know that RNA viruses are very difficult to treat. There are really no treatment for RNA viruses. In fact, almost the treatment itself is more symptomatic. Even creating vaccines is a challenge because of the mutation rate of RNA viruses and stuff. And also viruses are so small. And that's why when we look at viruses are so small, and depending on what type of virus it is, a DNA virus versus an RNA virus. An RNA virus, once it gets into the cell, folks, it starts making new viruses. It takes over the cell, versus a DNA virus, which has the ability to integrate its DNA into your DNA. And guess what? That is why some people get viral infections. They have increased cancers because the virus puts in a mutation in a genetic structure of your DNA. It causes a frame shift mutation or a mutation within your DNA that gives you or turns on cancer genes, or you end up with cancers and stuff. So viruses are very, very serious entities that causes lots and lots of human tragedies around the world. But also, I want you to understand that what we're finding now with global changing, we're finding viruses in Antarctica, we're finding viruses in North Pole. They've been frozen for 50,000 years, and we're thawing this. The temperature's changing. These viruses from many, many years ago, thousands of years ago, become alive. They become active. And so we need to make sure that we understand that maybe the next pandemic is going to be coming out of the North Pole on a virus that's been in the ice 50,000 years and stuff like that. And that's about all I want to say on viruses, because when we talk more into the treatment, we're going to get more on this. But this is a great slide for folks from coronavirus to togovirus, flavivirus, retrovirus. And one of the things I want people to also understand about my background is that I teach at the Heinrich Petite Institute of Virology in Germany. And my area of specialty was coronavirus pulmonary. And so I have a very good feel for understanding of the mechanism of action on how coronavirus affects the pulmonary system itself. And so these slides you folks will all have access to, and you'll be able to look at some of the different viruses that are out there and in what category they are. You can look at some of the RNA viruses from mumps, measles, etc. Viruses themselves are viruses, and DNA viruses are completely different than RNA viruses and stuff. And that's why when we look at vaccine platforms, we'll talk about vaccines at the end of our talk tonight, but you're kind of understanding why DNA vaccines are much more stable than RNA vaccines and stuff. Does anybody have any questions? Let's go for questions now, because we're going to go from here into COVID, and then we get into HIV and all the other stuff.
All right, somebody is asking, what was the point of wearing masks if the coronavirus is so small it can easily go through the masks?
Depending on what type of mask you had, and the most important mask is having an antiviral mask. But the reality is that has been a big controversial thing about masks. And here's the deal, folks. When you get infected with something, if you get 100% infection viral load breathing in is a lot more dangerous than somebody getting 25% viral load. So what does the mask do? The mask becomes a barrier to decrease the amount of viral load you breathe in. Some of the initial people that died in the COVID infection era were dentists that were engaged in people's face. A person coughed in their face, or the emergency room doctor had the patient cough in their face. They got 100% exposure, and these folks are out of here. And so the point of the mask is a protective barrier to decrease the amount of viral load that you can have. Is it the be all, the not? No. Decrease the viral load. For example, when I'm with a patient that has a respiratory component, and I'm certified in chemical and biological warfare by the U.S. Army. I'm very versed in different masks that we use for viral diseases, from Ebola to tuberculosis to nerve gas, and all of the other things that we use in the military to inflict damage on our enemy. When I'm in a room with a patient that has tuberculosis, I wear a mask because I've had several of my colleagues die from multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. That mask, absolutely correct. N95 works great for that because the bacteria is much bigger than the virus. But also you can have a mask respirator. You can have an antiviral mask that can decrease the amount of viral load that you can breathe in. That is the point of wearing masks. Not everybody's going to be able to buy a $500 mask or a $150 mask, but you can imagine being on an airplane and somebody sitting on an airplane in a environment like that, a dense environment, somebody coughs, well, everybody on the airplane is going to be infected. The people that have the mask on are going to decrease their chance of being infected. One of the things I've tried to articulate over the last few years is the word situational awareness. You wear a mask in certain situations. If you go into Walmart or Dollar Green on payday, and there's 1,000 people and they're coughing, I think it's smart to wear a mask. If you're going to be on an airplane for 16 hours during flu season, I think it's pretty smart to wear a mask. So that is the functionality of masks. But at the end of the day, masks can be a barrier, one part of your biosafety security protocols, i.e. washing your hands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is that masks can save your life in certain situations. I know that because I'm in this environment all the time, in hospitals with sick patients that have tuberculosis and God knows all types of different viral infections and stuff, respiratory. And so masks do have their place in our society. The problem that we had, that the mask became a political punching bag, people talking about their constitutional rights. And I talked about that early in 2020, 2021, is that I have a constitutional right not to be infected by you. And you have people out there in the world trying to infect people, i.e. you have guys out there that have HIV that are trying to infect women with HIV. And so the reality is that you have people that have a different mentality that will try to do harm on people. People coughing on groceries in the store, people coughing on, spitting on their hands and wiping on their tables and picking their nose and touching your food in the store. This is why you have to think not just biosafety security protocols on just a mask. You have to think of everything, trying to create that famous word, making your own bubble to be able to navigate. So I hope that answers the question on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that before we jump into COVID?
Someone is asking for other antiviral solutions.
Antiviral solutions, absolutely. You can go everything from Clorox to different chemical household goods that you can sterilize. Probably the biggest thing that I talked about early in the pandemic was alcohol. Alcohol is 100%, it does what it's supposed to do. But the problem with alcohol that people don't need to realize is that when you use alcohol evaporates. And that's why we always talk about getting 60% alcohol, ethyl alcohol versus 90% alcohol. If you go 90% alcohol, it evaporates pretty quickly. In organic chemistry and chemistry, we know that 60% has enough contact time that it allows the baby to do what it does and not evaporate as quick and get a better kill. That is why it's always great to alcohol. And like we say in surgery and hand washing, the solution to pollution is dilution, soap and water. And here's the deal. A lot of people doing this whole phenomenon didn't really understand that soap and water doesn't kill certain organisms, and people reinfect themselves. And so probably the biggest thing that I suggest for folks out there is what we use in the OR when we're washing our hands and when we're sterilizing our hands to do a surgical procedure, or my sister's delivering a baby, we use Hibiclens. And I talked about Hibiclens early in the pandemic as a great solution to be able to sterilize your hands and different things in your house and stuff like that. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Someone mentions their spouse is in the ER now due to second-degree heart block, and he is only 29. Why are there an increase in heart problems, and how can we help?
Well, the reality, I would bet to say that this individual had COVID or had the COVID vaccine, period, end of story. And this is a direct consequences of one, the COVID virus itself causing defect in the heart tissue or heart cells and causing arrhythmias, one, or two, that they had the vaccine and it created that famous word that I use, antibody-dependent enhancement, which means that you create autoantibodies that attack different organs. And that's just a phenomena. And if people really want to take a deep dive in that, you can look at dengue in the Philippines and antibody-dependent enhancement, which is the same phenomenon. The most important thing that I've said now, and I've had a individual send me a IG this morning saying he was 27 years old, very healthy, very excited about life. He's an athlete and he's worried about dropping dead. And I can figure that most people in that age group from 18 and 30, young men that are athletic, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, man, I could have a sudden cardiac infarct, i.e. I could pass out or die on the basketball court or the racquetball court or walking. My recommendation is that everybody, especially young men, should get an EKG, full cardiac workup, lab workup to make sure that they cannot see and maybe give them some more information to see what their heart is versus now just not knowing, because everybody that has been affected with COVID, which is a vast majority of people that have had the COVID vaccine, you really don't know what your heart manifestation is or your heart complication. So it's very important that you get that EKG, especially for kids that are playing athletic sports, our college age people, and our young military people. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And I just want to mention there are a lot of questions coming in, so our apologies if we do not get to all of them. So the next question, are the tests used for identifying viruses, PCR, antigen, and antibody tests faulty? What percentage of reliability are they?
Well, that's a very good question. And this is the reality that we had initially. And I wanted to, I'm going to answer this question and we're going to jump into the COVID, and then we can come back to more questions on that. But this is one of the biggest problems that we had initially when we had the COVID initial pandemic endemic here in the United States, because the CDC were trying to make antibody kits that couldn't recognize the virus itself. And so that lag over 2 or 3 months allowed the infection to spread even further. And at the end of the day, we have to understand, folks, like I said before, this is an RNA virus, and this RNA virus has the ability to mutate. It's changing itself. And now we're finding out it's just not the spike protein that changes in the coronavirus, it also the structure itself with multiple different mutations with changes in configuration, i.e. you can't see it. Well, i.e. if it changes, you can't pick it up. And this is why we're where we're at and stuff. And so that is why when an individual gets infected with the COVID infection and they come back negative, but they have signs and symptoms, clinical signs, you might need to do serial testing over a week, maybe every 2 or 3 days for 7 days. That is the reality, and making sure that whatever laboratory that you're using, understanding what their QE is, quality control, QC is on their testing. What is their accuracy? Is the sensitivity 90% or the sensitivity is less than that? Very, very important. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Really quick, Dr. Williams, just want to mention something. So
Go for it.
first off, brother, you have been cooking. And so And I was like, I don't want to interrupt anything. I want
Okay.
to go as far as we can without me interjecting at all. I just wanted to mention something here regarding, there's two specific things that are very, very, very vital that people are looking at now. One is the spike protein that I know we're going to get into because we're going to cover COVID next.
Yep.
And two, with regards to the PCR test, for those who were in Atlanta, when I went over this in person, in Atlanta, I brought up Kary Mullis, who is partially the inventor of the PCR test, which is he was recognized, of course, won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. And yes, early on, they were known to be faulty. CDC admitted that. LA Times published it. They were faulty. They could not detect whether or not a person was positive or negative. They could not detect it. It was very, very, very known. And just really quick, people are saying my volume is low. Let me know if that is true. Can you hear me, Dr. Rowland? Pretty clear? Okay, got you. Volume is fine. Okay, good. So let me just read this really quick, and then we're going to go into the COVID section. Now, I covered this in Atlanta, as I mentioned before. Dr. Kary Mullis died in 2019. He was exposing Anthony Fauci. He, of course, weeks after he told the CDC that the PCR test kits aren't designed to find a virus. In May of 1996, Dr. Mullis was interviewed by Dr. Gary Null in the following excerpt, and we'll play that video at another time. But he specifically was an American biochemist, and he was recognized in his role in the invention of the polymerase chain reaction technique, or PCR. He shared the 1993 Nobel Prize in Chemistry with Michael Smith and was awarded the Japan Prize in the same year. The point is, he knew, he told them, and they still pushed the PCR test to be the standard to find whether or not a person was infected, and it was not the standard to determine whether or not a person was infected. They switched from that to the, I believe, the saliva test to see if you were infected that way. And that also, okay, everyone keeps saying turn my volume up, and my volume is all the way up. Let me see here, 1 second. Sometimes it's agents trying to distract. So let me see here. Sincerely, let me do it this way really quick so I can make sure my volume is up. I don't know what's going on here, but okay, how is that? Is that good? Okay, good. So for the one saying that the sound isn't good, you are the minority right now. It's like 3 of you. Everyone else saying it's fine. So just wanted to make that mention, Dr. Kary Mullis. Please put that name in the chat. You can watch his video on YouTube where he exposes the fact that no, the PCR test was not effective in determining whether or not a person was infected with the virus. And he also was very critical about the fact that it can't determine whether or not you're infected with a virus of any kind, really. So just wanted to put that there as it pertains to the PCR. But go ahead, Dr. Rowe.
Hey, thank you for that. Can you hear me very well now? Okay. Well, folks, we're going to switch to COVID now because this is the hot topic. But COVID is going to lead us into talking about diseases that are coming on the horizon. Well, folks, let's get right down to it about COVID itself. COVID is one of the most spectacular viruses that's ever been introduced to man, period. Both in a viral sense, i.e., people don't realize that the coronavirus is an RNA virus, and that's very important. And like we said earlier, when we talk about RNA virus, we talk about the mutation capabilities of a virus. Well, guess what? The coronavirus is the most mutagenic virus on a planet. And you folks need to understand that we've all been exposed to the coronavirus. Every year, it is the second leading cause of the common cold. So what does that mean? Well, if I'm getting the COVID every year from the common cold and I get immunity from it, but I'm still getting infected from it, that means that guess what? That virus has a very high mutation rate. And a lot of you folks don't realize that the coronavirus first pandemic was 20,000 years ago. We can go look back and see in the analysis of people that died from genetic analysis that the coronavirus occurred 20,000 years ago. And most people don't realize that our first pathogenic coronavirus happened in 1958. And it was determined in England because we had the technology to be able to detect viruses. Folks, we've only been able to see viruses with electron microscope in the last, century, with our techniques, being able to look under microscopy, be able to use different fluorescent technology to stain them, to see them. In fact, my laboratory here in Little Rock, I have a fluorescent microscope, but the technology has grown over the years. But the reality, folks, is that the coronavirus is the first virus that has the ability, what we call in virology, trophism. And I want everybody to look up the word trophism. Trophism is the ability of a pathogen to affect a certain organ through a specific target tissue. What do I mean by trophism? Simple term. Well, guess what? If I got HIV and I put HIV into a shampoo and wash my hair with shampoo, HIV, I'm not going to get HIV. I could take polio and paint it on my toenails. I'm not going to get polio. But if that HIV virus touches or gets attached to the CD4 cell, I'm going to get HIV. If I drink poliovirus in the water and the poliovirus ends up touching my gastrointestinal tract, I'm going to get polio. If I get bit by a dog or a bat that has rabies and the rabies virus attaches to my peripheral nerve, I'm going to get rabies. Well, guess what, folks? The coronavirus has what we call multi-trophism. It can attack to your cells, your heart cells, your gastrointestinal cells, your kidney cells. It can attach to your testicles, your ovaries, your skin cell, your brain cell, go across the blood-brain barrier. It has a multitude of trophism, which means, folks, this is why we see the amount of different disease processes. Some people lose taste. Some people can't smell. Some people have heart problems. Some people have pulmonary. Some people have gastrointestinal. Some people have COVID toes. We can go dementia. We can go down the line because the coronavirus has what? Trophism, which means it has the ability to attach to every cell, which gives it a genetic evolutionary advantage to be able to sustain itself in the population. But when we look at the COVID and how it really started, because this is a big argument. Some people say biolab, some people say it's natural, but the reality between both of them, the reality is that we're never, ever going to get rid of the coronavirus. That's the reality. When people talk about coronavirus and when people made the lie to you guys that made people drink the Kool-Aid and they said, well, you know what? You get the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, you're not going to get COVID. I already told you guys that wasn't going to happen. That's why I was kind of probably blackballed on a lot of programs, my follow-up on MSNBC or, my talk with, me and Fauci were supposed to do a debate. That didn't happen because I have a different viewpoint. In my viewpoint, I knew the vaccines weren't not going to work because the virus mutates too fast. That is the reality of the coronavirus, folks. Simple terms. What do you mean you're going to create a booster shot? I told folks back in 2020 that you're going to be getting 500 booster shots over the next 100 years. Why? Well, I understand RNA mutations, and the virus is mutating on a trajectory is out of this world. That is why you do not do a pandemic vaccine program in the middle of a pandemic. Because can you imagine having somebody has the virus day 1 versus somebody day 14? You inject them to a vaccine that probably has a 10% vaccine, what we call effectiveness. You don't get 100% kill rate of the virus or neutralization. That virus has the time to mutate. The virus has time to do what it needs to do and change. So let's take a step back to the beginning of the coronavirus. What should have happened was that people should have had that big mama conversation. This is an RNA virus. The virus mutates. There's no treatment. We treat symptoms. Vaccines are way, way, way down the line, about 10 years. Folks, natural immunity, biosafety protocols,
washing your hands, mask, all that stuff that Big Mama talk about, and your natural immunity is going to get you to the other side. That's the reality. But let's take a step back, because when people said about the coronavirus that, man, you get the vaccine, you're not going to get it. Well, folks, we would never, ever get rid of the coronavirus, just like we got rid of the smallpox, because guess what? Smallpox does not have an animal model. So when we talk about infectious diseases and stuff, in the reality of what sustains a population, the coronavirus is almost in every animal on the planet. Deers, dolphins, bats, monkeys, sheeps. The animal vector sustains the virus. So the virus is always going to be here.
Dogs.
True that the virus did jump from bats into human beings. It's been doing it for years. We can talk about Ebola, et cetera, et cetera. But the point, it doesn't matter. The point is, guess what, folks? We will never have a cure. There will never be a vaccine that's going to eradicate the SARS-CoV virus. We're going to be dealing with this for the next 1,000 years. I'll be long gone, and they'll still be trying to figure out the coronavirus infection. That is the reality. And one of the things that's important for you, because I think as we talk about the science, I have to break it down to where you can understand it as a layman person, the way I see it. See, I train students in wet markets. I do research in wet markets in the Amazon jungle. When people do, Doc, what's a wet market? Well, a wet market in most countries, folks, is a place that is horrific, but it's a food source. People get their meat from there. People get their protein from there. People are eating bats. People eating alligator brains. People are eating, drinking bat blood, eating fish, sheep's on top of pigs, pigs on top of sheep's. People are peeing, the pigs are peeing, the cows are coughing. They're interchanging all of this interchange of fluids. Coronavirus mixing with Ebola, Ebola mixing with influenza, pigs coughing with the ducks, ducks coughing with the bats, interchanging this. This is a cesspool. This is a breeding ground for pandemic. That is why we spend times in wet markets monitoring the diseases and stuff. We go and get samples to find out when the next influenza is going to happen, when's the next cholera outbreak. Whatever the disease is, wet markets drive these pandemics because we have all these animals in a confined space, interchanging their body fluids, and this is how diseases kick off. And here's the reality, folks, when we look at the coronavirus, and we can look at the genetic maps of the disease itself, we can look at the morphology, I can look at the genetic, the genetic background. And what I've seen so far is that as a biological warfare guy, I haven't seen the change in the sequence of the genetic material that says, hey, somebody spliced in Ebola or somebody took something out. I haven't seen that. And I'm hoping to be able to see that one day so we can, substantiate that people believe it came from a biological lab in China. Is it a possibility? Absolutely. There's a possibility that somebody in that lab got exposed with the virus, went out, coughed, and it started spreading. But it's also a possibility that, guess what? That we know that there was a wet market in Wuhan that the virus got introduced to a person and spread it also. But we do know for a fact that Wuhan is a major industrial place in the world for people around the world, plants. Every nation has somebody in Wuhan working at some industrial plant there. And at that time that virus kicked off, it was the holidays. So that person was infected, got on the airplane, and man, you got to look at the cell phone tracking of people leaving Wuhan, going to New Zealand, Australia, LA, Toronto, Germany, etc., Italy, spreading this virus all over the world. And guess what? That virus took off. It ramped up. And there's another thing that I want people to be able to take home tonight is the understanding what we call the R0 number, or what we call the reproductive number. What does that mean? Well, we rate different pathogens on a level of their virulence, their ability to affect people. i.e., we know that Ebola has an R naught number about 1. We know that HIV has an R naught number about 3. Influenza about 3.5. Measles has an R naught number of 12. What does that mean? Well, that means that one person that gets Ebola can really affect only one person. Somebody has influenza with an R naught number of 1.5 can affect 1.5 people. The most infectious is measles, which has an R naught number of 12. What does that mean? One person with measles that coughs can affect 12 people. That is why when we've done the studies, somebody in the room coughs, man, everybody within 5 minutes infected in that restaurant. That's why it's important to wear a mask. But when we look at the R naught number of the SARS-CoV virus, folks, initially the R naught number was a 2, then went to a 4. Guess what the R naught number of the COVID virus is, coronavirus, pathogenic, anywhere from a 12 to a 20, which means it is the most infectious thing on the planet, which means that one person can infect up to 20 people. That is very infectious. This is why this thing is done what is done. But when we look at the coronavirus itself and its RNA mutation rate, you guys remember in the beginning, we went from alpha strain, the beta strain, the delta strain, the gamma strain, the lambda strain, up into the family, the Omicron family. And we went from 5 mutations to 7 mutations up to the Omicron family that had 70 to 100 different mutations. Oh my God, this virus is changing. How in the world, simple terms, can you come up with a vaccine that has every possible mutation on the planet for coronavirus? It's impossible. And people don't realize that what Pfizer did was they went, got the DNA, the RNA makeup of the virus from China, and they made a vaccine. That's what they do. We exchange information. They took the backbone, made a vaccine off of the ancestral alpha strain. And folks, what does the alpha strain got to do with Delta, Gamma, Lambda, Omicron? There's no way in the world that's going to work in a million years. Now, let's step back for just one moment. I want you guys to think about this because we talk about this, and I know I'm kind of speeding up, but I want to talk to you about messenger RNA. What does that mean in the COVID sense? Because this is supposed to be the big thing that's going to change medicine. Oh, I don't think so. Why? Because what they did was with the messenger RNA was just a message. When we look at genetic material, we go DNA goes to RNA, RNA goes to protein. Well, the messenger RNA is the RNA, which is a protein. What they did, they took the message, which makes the protein, the spike protein, and they put it in a vector and made their vaccine out of that. Well, what does that mean? Well, okay, I got the spike protein. I inject you with that spike protein, that messenger RNA, and your body sees that messenger RNA, that spike protein, and makes antibodies to it. And guess what? That's antibodies that your body makes that we talked about earlier, the IgGs, the IgMs. Guess what, folks? It binds that virus, it neutralizes that spike protein. So you got the virus itself, you have a receptor on it. Guess what? What happens if that spike protein mutates? Guess what? The body can't see it anymore. It's a zero-sum game, ball game over. It's never going to work. And so what the virus has figured out is that, man, they made a protein, messenger RNA protein. They injected in me. So they make spike proteins to the spike protein antibodies that doesn't allow me to bind to the cell. But what happens if I change my configuration? Well, if I mutate the spike protein, it's over. You can't protect. The body can't see it. The body cannot bind to that spike protein on that virus, and that virus is figured out. The virus not only mutates the spike protein, it also mutates itself to allow itself to attach to the cell to get in another way. So that's why the vaccine is never going to work, because guess what? It is only
one way. So when you think about this, think about it in a simple term. I have a virus that goes in my body. Would I want my body to make antibodies to just one part of a virus, or do I want antibodies to the whole complete virus for a better chance of neutralizing that virus? Well, if I inject your body with the spike protein and there's a mutation, you're not getting any effect. That's why people are getting multiple infections. I'd rather have a traditional vaccine where you take the whole coronavirus, attenuated, inject you with it if you're going down the vaccine route to make antibodies to the whole entire virus, not just one part. It's a zero-sum game. That is why you lose. Zero-sum game, basic virology, basic mechanism action, ball game over. Vaccine will not work. And this is happening because of the environmental pressures that we talked about earlier. And I want to try to make this academic, but bring it down to a term that it makes sense, so that Big Mama can understand it. And you have to understand, folks, that when you do a vaccine or any medication, it could be an antibiotic, you want to make sure that whatever antibiotic you're getting or vaccine, you want to have 100% cure rate of that particular microorganism in your body. Because if not, guess what happens? You create resistance. The virus, through evolution, I asked the question, hey, are viruses smart? Do viruses think? Do they have a conscience? How do they change? If you don't get 100% neutralization, you leave one organism alive or multiple organisms, they mutate. And this has been the problem that we have. The vaccine is driven, the mutation is driven the pandemic. And this is why this pandemic cycle is going to continue on and on and on. Because at the end of the day, what should have happened, and all you folks out there that drunk the Kool-Aid or got the vaccine, I helped write the vaccine platform for the Vatican. Well, that's pretty, I got to give myself a little credit. I know a little bit about viruses. Here's the deal. If you believe in the vaccines, folks, do you know what your neutralizing antibodies are? And most of you guys don't. I've been to these churches with 1,000 Black folks. I'm giving a speech about coronavirus. I say, okay, folks, how many folks of you guys got the vaccine? Every one of these folks put their hands up. And I go, how many folks in here know what your neutralizing antibodies, means these are the protective antibodies, your IgG, that are responsible for neutralizing the virus infection. And nobody knew that. And that was part of the program that was going to fail from day one. If you do a vaccine, you have to know what your neutralizing antibodies. So everybody should have got their antibody levels measured to see maybe you already were exposed and you have protective antibodies, or maybe this was your first time getting the vaccine and you can measure your antibodies in 30 days, 90 days, 6 months to see if you generated antibodies. And now we know the truth, folks, that the vaccines do not have that credibility. Because
Dr. Rowland.
Yeah, go for it.
Really quick, Paul, just if you don't mind, just really quick. What you are alluding to and what you are saying, because this is what people are asking. So the vaccine doesn't work. The vaccine is something to drive, this mutation, the strains that continue to mutate, get around it. So the question is, natural immunity. Can you please tell them what role does natural immunity play in this entire circumstance?
Natural immunity is exactly what I just said. Your body gets exposed to the whole virus and you make antibodies to the complete virus, not just to the spike protein, to the virus core itself. You neutralize the whole virus. Your body makes antibodies to the whole virus and not just to one particular part of the virus's spike protein, because it is the most mutagenic part of the virus itself. Zero-sum game, ball game over with, done. That is simple virology where everybody does not understand that, or has not been explained, articulated to the general public. Natural immunity will always outweigh natural immunity in 1,000 years. And even Fauci said that natural immunity will always be the immunity because this is what we teach. The natural immunity is your innate immunity, folks. Your natural immunity is your B cell immunity. Your natural immunity is your cell mediated immunity. Your body is an orchestra. It sees it. Everybody has a role to play. And that is the reality of understanding this. And here's the sad thing about it. We've gone from the alpha strain of the coronavirus all the way up into the Omicron. Man, there's triple Russian virus out there. There are all types of different viruses, coronavirus that you folks don't even know about that are out there, which is ball game over. Let me explain to you about the Omicron, folks. The Omicron virus was originally found in an HIV Black 37-year-old female in South Africa that had HIV. Well, what does that mean? Well, that person was HIV positive. That person had the coronavirus infection in them for up to 265 days. That virus had the ability to live in that individual, see the whole entire immune system, and it mutated. And man, now you got the Omicron that we're dealing with now. They're killing people, keeping people sick. It's mutating even further. And folks, I'm sorry, the booster shots are never going to work. In fact, we can talk about the mutation rate of the RNA virus or the coronavirus is something that we've never seen before. And this is driving the vaccine has driven the coronavirus infection to where it is. Better yet, folks, when you seriously think about it, I mean, just sit back and you think about the coronavirus. How can you do a vaccine program? For example, I go to a restaurant, somebody coughs, I pick up the virus is my body. It takes about 24 hours for that virus to be able to pick up speed, to be able to cause fever, infection in my body. It takes about 7 days for me to make antibodies, switching from IgM to IgG, and 7 days to start maybe trying to neutralize that virus in an ideal world. Well, what happens if I'm on day 7 of the infection and I get a vaccine? What happens if I get the vaccine and I'm day 2 in the infection? Well, guess what happens? That virus sees that. It takes 7 days for you to make antibodies. You just created a monster. The coronavirus monster mutation is what you're seeing. And this is basic virology that any virologist will be able to sit down and say, okay, explain to me about mutations and why it works. And this is the ideal understanding of why we're where we're at today. And this is why it's so important for you folks to understand when we talk about disease and disease transmission, or how do we protect ourselves? Because somebody asked that question earlier about masks, and and there's an argument about masks. I don't argue about a mask. If I'm in a certain situation, somebody's coughing, hacking on an airplane, I'm wearing a mask. Or better yet, let's think about this, folks. In my world of infectious diseases, we have what we call the 7 F's of transmission. Well, if you're going to understand disease, you better understand how diseases, you can be infected with disease, and we call it the 7 F's. Well, one of the F's is we got feces, we have flies, we have fingers, we have food, we have formite, we have foot, and we have, I think that's 7 F's. Let's go over the 7 F's real quick before we take a break on understanding disease transmission. Well, I know one of the F's is feces. And well, guess what, folks? When we look at the coronavirus, there's 3 major ways of contracting this virus. 1, secretion, respiratory, and feces. Well, feces is huge. Feces is everywhere. Feces is on the ATM machine. It's on the gas pump handle. It's on the ATM. Feces is on your money. Feces is in the sewer. Well, you better wash your hands because the virus can be in feces. In fact, we find the coronavirus, live in feces up to 28 days in the bathroom. Go ahead and flush your toilet at the airport and wash the back spray. Viruses all over the bathroom. You walk in there with the bottom of your shoes, or you put your purse down on the bathroom floor, you can get infected. Better yet, shake some people's hands that don't wash their hands in the bathroom, and you're going to find out about disease transmission. So feces.
understanding that is one way diseases are transmitted. Flies is another way. Flies, they're everywhere. Flies land on your potato salad. People don't realize flies, part of the flies' life cycle is that they live in feces. They eat feces. So they land on your potato salad and they regurgitate the feces onto your potato salad or to your fried chicken. You're going to get sick. Fingers. Well, people's hands are nasty. Just think about it. You folks, we've done the studies. People go in the bathroom, they take a dump. They don't wash their hands. They come out of there, they touch the door handle, touch the water faucet. They go to the table, they sit, they touch the menu, they touch money. Fingers are nasty. Make sure you wash your hands. We talk about food. Food's another way of transmitting disease. People don't realize that the SARS-CoV virus can live in ice cream. We find it in frozen chicken, your pork chops. You can imagine at Tyson meat plant or chicken plant, somebody's with COVID is coughing and hacking because they don't have the proper mask, and these virus lands on your pork chop and your fried chicken wings that they freeze and they send it to your local Kroger store, and you go home and you throw them out. You touch that chicken and touch your face, you're going to get coronavirus. Because guess what? Food is notoriously for transmitting diseases. Let's talk about foot. The bottom of your shoes is another way. Never let people wear shoes in your house. Make sure that people take their shoes out. The Japanese people figured out a long time ago, shoes are nasty. Big Mama said, take your shoes off at the front of the door. Hey, I got my food that's possibly infected. You better make sure you cook your food. Make sure you do fire safety or making sure you clean your fruits and vegetables at stores. You guys have been there before because I'm teaching my class right now. One of my lab projects is I have my students do scientific observation. They go to Kroger's and they watch people what they do in the meat market. They watch them what they do in the produce aisle. And you guys have seen folks going there. They stretch their butts, they pick their nose, they wipe their fingers on the bananas, they squeeze the peaches, they lick the grapes, they taste the grapes, they put it back in there. People are just downright nasty. So make sure you're doing whatever you can do to control your food. Another F is what we call fomite. And fomite is an inanimate object. That's your cell phone. That's needles. That could be the linen on your bed. That could be your pen. Always make sure if you're going in and out the environment, being exposed, that you're sterilizing these inanimate objects, i.e. your pen, i.e. your cell phone. You can imagine how nasty people's cell phones are. Better yet, how nasty is a computer in a library that thousands of people touch? That's an inanimate object that can be able to also sustain and transmit infection. And so these F's is very important in the world of disease. If you understand how diseases are transmitted, if you understand the F's in transmission disease, if you prevent the transmission of the F's to yourself, you decrease yourself in food, flies, feces, you decrease your chance of being infected. Let me see if I got all the F's right. Food, feet, fingers, fomite, flies, foot. That's all of them. Any questions?
But let me first go into this. So Doctor, thank you for all of that thus far. And I'm gonna tell y'all, many of you are like, damn it, I'm not touching nobody, I'm not shaking no hands, I'm not walking nowhere. I don't even want to look at nobody. Some of y'all are like, bro, I'm fist bumping from now on. I don't even want a fist bump. I want an elbow bump. I'm good. I'm a knee bump somebody. I get you. When I say I get you, I get you. Don't go crazy, y'all. When you're dealing with scientists, they tell you the raw truth. He is someone who deals with this from the source in laboratories, in the jungles where people are throwing up. And I mean, like this is very, very real. So the scientists who deal with these things, they're going to give you the raw truth. Now, I will let you know the major thing that we have to focus on, okay, with getting this knowledge from Dr. Rowland. Number one, your immune system. You have to focus on building your lymphatic and immune system. You have to focus on getting rid of those things that break it down increasing those things that build it up. Your organic seeded fruits and vegetables, your well water or spring water, your vitamin D, whether if you get it from the sun, if you don't necessarily have the sun out too much, depending on where you live, you may have to get it in a supplement form. You want to make sure you're taking your ginger. You want to make sure you're taking your vitamin C or liposomal liquid vitamin C, trusted sources, non-GMO organic liposomal vitamin C, and many other things. And you can put it in the chat, a lot of the different things. Now, I'm going to mention this really quick, Dr. Rowland, before you continue, because you, like I said, brother, you cooking. And I hope y'all are getting it, because he is giving you like a quick, basic intro into all these areas. And it really is an intro because of a whole lot of other information. Ivermectin, for those who are asking about that, they did a complete smear campaign. Ivermectin won a Nobel Prize for being one of the top anti-parasitics. It is on the World Health Organization for essential medicines. It has been prescribed. It has literally, they produced over 4 billion tablets of ivermectin. It has been prescribed to tens of millions of people all over the planet. So that's one of those. Hydrochloroquine is another one. Quercetin is another one. Alpha interferon, and feel free to put these in the chat. These are some quick, I'm naming these quickly, but these are all very critical for your health. Alpha interferon, Paximune, which right now, Paximune, Dr. Aleem Muhammad, one of the trusted doctors who's been pushing that, since the 80s, when Fauci was pushing the damn AZT. If you remember that back then, Dr. Rowland was pushing that crap. Paximune. Yeah, I mean, seriously, Paximune right now is going for about $120 a bottle. I just want y'all to know this, how serious it is, because of how effective these things are. And these are all different things that can help. And again, everything else to boost your immune system, get rid of the sugars for the most part. You got to exercise, you got to drink water, blah, blah, blah. Y'all know how this goes. But go ahead, Dr. Rowland, just wanted to go ahead and interject that. For those who didn't see the link, he was alluding to, and then he dropped it on your head. He went from the scientific terms to the real simple: natural immunity wins. We've been saying this. We've been saying it. Dr. Rowland, I was pushing these a long time ago because they were talking mess, like you said, about us, throwing us under the bus. And I said, wow, so they're attacking. They said, as a matter of fact, at a certain point, they said natural immunity is not better than the vaccine.
Well, that's a complete lie.
Come on.
They got a lot of people killed and a lot of people injured, because at the end of the day, natural immunity is the way it goes. And I tried to explain, give people the understanding how important our immune system is. Our immune system is responsible for not just viruses or microorganisms or intracellular versus cellular mediated immunity that's responsible for that, but it's also our body's responsible for pathogens that live outside the cell. And this is the natural immunity. This is why it's so important. People have to have a great mental attitude, vitamin D, vitamin C, healthy lifestyle. The problem that we have, and most people don't realize, that 99% of the people that get COVID do absolutely fantastic. It is the 1% of people that get in the hospital secondary comorbidities, i.e., they might have had heart surgery, maybe they are cancer, immunocompromised, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the stat reality on the COVID situation, is that when Pfizer did their initial study, they did nothing but white folks in Germany. Everybody healthy. And one of the things I want people to realize and always remember from this conversation, 2 words: vaccine effectiveness and vaccine efficacy. Vaccine efficacy, folks, means this, guys. I get 100 people. I want to get my new vaccine to the market. And this vaccine is supposed to prevent pimples. Well, guess what? I'm going to get 100 special forces guys, 8% body fat. They're the most healthiest people on the planet. And 2 people get a headache. That is a 98% vaccine efficacy. Well, guess what? FDA rule says if it's above 50%, you can take that to the market. Well, the truth is vaccine efficacy doesn't mean anything. It is vaccine effectiveness, which is an important thing. What does that mean? I take that vaccine and I put it in the field, like COVID. And in Germany, it was nothing but white, healthy people. They got their vaccine efficacy.
They tell you that on television, which is a lie, because the vaccine effectiveness is what it really is. And when you take the vaccine effectiveness, what does that mean? I take that vaccine and I inject Big Mama with high blood pressure, cancer, amputation, end-stage renal disease, immunocompromised people. Well, guess what, folks? That vaccine efficacy comes to 13% vaccine effectiveness. And you look at Moderna, you look at Pfizer, you look at Johnson & Johnson, their vaccine went from this 90% vaccine efficacy down to 10, 12% vaccine effectiveness, which means it really doesn't work. Your natural immunity is better than that. And we've shown that the antibodies from your natural immunity last longer than the vaccine itself. In fact, in their own paper, the vaccine only antibodies that they said they had only lasted like 89 days at the max, which means that in 89 days, you won't have any antibodies. Guess what you got to get, folks? You got to get a booster shot to prime yourself up. You do it again and do it again. Guess what happened? You end up turning off that beautiful natural immunity. You turn that system off. That is the reality. Now, let's jump back to the last thing about fomite and understanding what a fomite is. Because I think it's very important in the coronavirus sense. Most people don't realize that the initial COVID outbreak in Germany happened in a Bavarian motor work plant. Chinese worker from China, Wuhan, was there visiting the German automotive work company. They were in the cafeteria eating lunch, and the Chinese guy asked the German guy, "Please pass me the salt shaker." He passed that salt shaker to that German. That German became the first person to get COVID, die in the rest of Germany's history, pandemic. A salt shaker is a fomite that can transmit a disease at that powerful level. A pen, a cell phone, something to really think about. And then at the end of the day, folks, when we look at the SARS-CoV virus, I want you guys to think about the sewage. Because at the end of the day, when we're determining if a virus is going to sustain itself, because people ask the question, Dr. Rowland, when is the pandemic ends? Well, the pandemic ends when we do not see any viruses in the sewage. Hey, example, Pakistan, polio. Well, everybody in Pakistan had polio. We measured the viral polio virus in the sewage, positive. We treat everybody with the polio vaccine over time. Now, guess what? There is no polio virus in the feces. The virus pandemic went in when we do not see any coronavirus in the feces. And guess what, folks? Every municipality from New York City to New Mexico has coronavirus in the feces in the sewage, which means that that is a direct representation of the health of the population. So that means that somebody's carrying that virus is in the population. Once we do not see any virus in the sewage, guess what? You got a healthy population. But now what we're seeing is that we're getting COVID virus mixing with other COVID virus and COVID virus mixing with animal viruses, and we're creating more and more mutations in the sewage. So that's why it's so important that we have some type of sanitational biosafety intelligence to make sure that the water is being sterilized to a level that there are no viruses, i.e. maybe you're in rural Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, and your sewage water is coming through your shower and you're in there taking a shower, or your child is in the bathtub being affected by the virus itself, or your big mama has a septic tank and that septic tank is leaking in the yard and the kids are playing there, you can be infected. And so sewage is always very important. And we can talk about sewage on another day, but I can tell you right now, I've talked about it. You can look at my IG. The reality is that New York City is a groundwork for, it's a hot zone. Every disease you can imagine is in the sewage, from polio to RSV to you name it, coronavirus, I can go down the line of different diseases in the sewage. And you guys can imagine the sewage coming out of a medical hospital with all the sick people and all the mixing of the antibiotics. This is what creates this environment, induces mutations, induces the expression of diseases and stuff. And so that's all I want to say on COVID for right now. Any questions before we jump into HIV and AIDS?
Yes.
I know Akuna's going to look at the questions really quick. Everybody, I hope you are taking notes. Take notes. Main thing you have to look at solution wise: sanitation, immune boosting, proper diet. Make sure your environment is clean. You want to sanitize, sterilize. This is really what ended. I know they gave vaccine the credit for, was it eradicating polio? They give vaccine the credit, but it was really sanitation. It was isolation. It was actually people taking themselves away from each other. It was them cleaning up their home, their environment, making sure it was clean. That is actually what eradicated polio. It was not the shot. Polio was eradicated before the shot was even released. And so they try to jump in there and take the credit for it. So make sure your home is clean, your body is clean, and do your best to make sure that you keep it that way. That's the primary thing that you should look at right now while you're getting all this information. But go ahead, Akuna, with the questions.
Yes, so there are quite a few. So once again, if we do not get to them, our apologies. But if you join our private network group, you have direct access. So that's the best way because we're able to answer more at that point. So a lot of people want to know about the shedding. Is it true that the spike protein can shed and be transferred from person to person? Specifically, they want to know if somebody received the shot and a booster, if they have sexual intercourse with that person, can that spike protein shed to the other person?
Is there a possibility? Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you. Another person is asking about the natural immunity. They say, okay, if we end up getting COVID, does that mean that we have immunity now?
Yeah, you automatically, that's what natural immunity is. I mean, I've had COVID twice. I've survived. Was I sick? Absolutely. It's one of the worst cases of flu, but everybody that gets COVID will have some natural immunity. We've shown in children who've been affected with the COVID virus, they have immunity up to 9 months. And they've done the study where they've had booster shots. 2 boosters didn't last that long, maybe 6 months at the max. So your natural immunity is always a way to go and stuff. And when you go down the vaccine trail, folks, you have to realize once you inject this in your body, it's ball game over with. And the reality is what we're seeing now is this antibody-dependent enhancement. So the first time you get the vaccine, the body comes to check it out. You get a second injection, then you create these autoantibodies that are causing probably most of the damage now, the myocarditis, the pericarditis, the gastrointestinal problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, folks, the science is going to give us the reality and the truth over time. There's no way in hell anybody could have made a prediction back 3 years ago that said, well, you know what, you get this vaccine, it's not going to happen. Oh, no way. You have to wait to see what the outcome is. And that is the shame part about it, is that you have people now that push this poison, people push the narrative, told you what was going to happen, and they couldn't predict that. And now we see all the 200 different complications of people with long-term COVID symptoms, from dementia, Parkinson's, loss of eyesight, Guillain-Barré syndrome, myocarditis, gastrointestinal problems, sterility, females having menstrual problems that are postmenopausal, or 14-year-old girls, periods that are stopping, the whole gamut, because this virus has multi-trophism, but also the vaccines are producing autoantibodies that are attacking all these different cells that are all over the body. And so we're still early in this process. And like I said 3 years ago, we're going to spend more money on COVID, on healthcare, disability, long-term complication than we're on the acute crisis itself. And this is the reality. And next time they start talking about booster shots, you better read the fine print. You better make sure you got informed consent, i.e. when I operate on a patient, or I'm doing a procedure on a patient that can change that patient's life, you sign an informed consent that says you could die, get a scar, all the horrific things that you can get. You sign up, you sign that, I waive my right to that. How many people signed informed consent? I don't know of anybody in my area that done that. They just gave Big Mama a sandwich, told you to get this COVID vaccine, it was going to be all right. Well, you next time, make sure you read the fine print, because this stuff does have an effect on your life. And I don't care what Joe Biden says, period. The science does not back what he's trying to do. You would have to be completely out of your mind, because this time You had 3 years to see how this played out. And in reality, it didn't play out the way they told you it was going to play out, because there are thousands of videos of Fauci on television telling people you get the COVID vaccine, you won't get COVID. And a bunch of movie stars that were saying the same thing. You get COVID, you get the COVID vaccine, you're not going to get COVID. And folks who've gotten COVID, they died, got sick, and there are a multitude of complications that are still coming down the pipeline that we still don't know about.
And Dr. Rowling, to add to that point, matter of fact, no, not even to add to that, to the point that he brought up for those who were asking, when he mentioned the informed consent, I can't stress enough how basic this is, y'all. It is so basic. Like he said, he doesn't know anyone in his practice, in his area where he went, who was given informed consent. The informed consent is when you are told all of the good and the bad of this option. Okay, doc, if I take this, can you give me the informed consent? Okay, so that means I have to tell you all the negative effects that were found,
Absolutely.
right, in the trial data, in the studies. These are the list of things that have happened in the trial. But then also here is the good. Okay, the informed consent also includes what? Other options.
Absolutely.
Other options. You want to go the nutritionist route? You want to go the naturopathic route? Do you want to go the acupuncturist route? Whatever. The other alternatives to tackle this issue, here are the other solutions as well. That's full informed consent. What they did was nothing but full-on propaganda. Take the shot, don't do nothing else. Take the shot, nothing else works. Take the shot. That's not informed consent. That's not medicine. That is full-blown drug dealing propaganda. That's what happened.
I think also important, Riz, is that you need to make sure you keep reminding people about informed consent. That is so critical. On the rest of your platform, people have to be informed. This is the first drug I've ever seen in my life where I'm watching a basketball game on television. They say there's a new drug that for psoriasis. And man, they tell you these people are doing this medication. There's 5,000 things that the psoriasis medication that you can have, can make you go sterile, blind, etc. This is the first drug that is not one commercial telling you about anything negative about the vaccine. That tells everybody this is a bunch of pixie dust in the 7 dwarfs.
Come on.
And Wizard of Oz is not in Kansas, it's on the moon.
Come on now, look, okay, wait now. And also to validate the other point that Dr. Rowling brought up, when he said the money that will be spent now is on treating those who have negative side effects from taking the shot. Do you know that right now in Australia, they are now announcing a COVID vaccine injury program for those who took the shot? They have already announced this, I believe, 2 months ago in Canada. They have already paid out over $4 billion to families who have proven that their negative effects were as a direct result of taking the COVID shot. And they have already paid out over $4 billion to families in Canada right now. This is something I want y'all to know. The insanity behind this, because most people know about, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, 1986, and they're like, well, you can't sue pharmaceutical companies. Well, there are other ways. They promoted something by lying. They just outright lied. They said safe and effective, but according to, and as Dr. Rowling was speaking of as well, the Freedom of Information Act request brought out the paperwork from Pfizer's trial data. Once that was brought out in the trial data, it showed that they had women who had abnormal menstrual cycles, interruption in menstrual cycles, miscarriages, Bell's palsy, myocarditis, pericarditis, death, strokes, heart attack. All of this was in the trial data. And Pfizer knew it, and they still released the shots. And because of that, that helped people to now be able to sue because of a somewhat of fraudulent promotion of products. They lied about what they promoted with these products. So it was a loophole in being able to go at it, as far as legal. So Canada right now has a vaccine injury program for those who took the shot. They've already paid people. Australia is now announcing one, and I believe a few other European nations are announcing them as well, because they all found out they were lied to. America is simply trying to hold on to this damn fantasy, as Dr. Rowling said, this pixie dust, because they don't want to pay out this money. They are like, we are already bankrupt. America's already in debt. We do not want to pay people any money. So it is real they have admitted they were wrong. All right, but they're doing it quietly. I just want to add that to Dr. Rolling's point.
I want to also add, just to throw this out there for people to think about it. You better make sure you figure out where the pilots got their vaccines are, because pilots are starting to die flying their planes at 35,000 feet in airplanes at 35,000 feet in the bathroom.
Come
So
on.
that is one of the reasons why the military really wasn't pushing vaccine on pilots, because it's kind of hard flying a $35 million jet in Mach 2 at 40,000 feet and you have a heart problem. You ain't gonna make it. So that's something to think about, folks.
And I travel every other week, Dr. Rowling. So, okay, everybody, I know we're winding down. He's about to go into the next two areas. Stay on. I appreciate y'all for staying strong. I know it is 9:21. The baby's probably crying. Y'all probably getting ready to, go to sleep to get ready for work. Out here at 6:22. We appreciate y'all for sticking. Stick with us a little more. It's a lot of information, but you needed this information. We appreciate you for taking time. And again, Dr. Rowling, thank you for using your expertise to really bring value and stick to that integrity, that, that ethics, as it pertains to the Hippocratic Oath that you took and others took. We appreciate you for abiding by that. So go ahead, my brother, continue to take it away to the next area.
Well, folks, we're going to switch subjects now, but I think it's very important, because as a member of the Black AIDS Institute, as a science officer for them, one of the things that's really affecting this topic that me and Rizzy talked about was infectious diseases in the Black Americans. And one of them was, COVID, and there are a multitude of other different diseases. And we're going to have to come back another time to take another in-depth dive into infectious diseases that are affecting Black Americans. But one of the things that's it's essential threat to us is the AIDS phenomenon. HIV is absolutely killing and affecting the Black race here in the United States at a level that's unbelievable. I want to talk about how HIV got into the United States, which makes a little bit sense to you, and then you can understand where we've gone from in the last 50 years. HIV is really a monkey disease. It started in the Congo. In our first genetic analysis, 1908 was the first person that was infected with HIV. We've done the genetic analysis to a bushman who probably ate monkey meat, got bit by the monkey. But the bottom line is that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they had a bunch of revolutions, folks. At that time, it was the Belgians, they folks French. There was a revolution. They kicked the French out. And they had to have somebody that spoke French in the Congo, Republic of Congo, that had the ability to be able to run their schools, their airports, etc. Well, guess who the people they had to bring to the Congo that could sustain the society when the French were kicked out, the Belgians were kicked out. Guess who it was? It was the Haitians. The Haitians were brought over to Africa, whatever reason, through the 60s, up to the 60s. In the 70s, they were there. They had sex with different people. And then the Haitians were kicked out of the Congo, went back to Haiti. Well, about late 70s, 80s, early 80s, well, there was a man out of Miami who figured out, man, I can make money off of blood, because there was such a blood shortage in the United States. So he would take a 747 plane, go to Haiti, and give people $20 for their blood, bring it back to the United States. And that blood was dispensed all over the country to heart transplants, Arthur Ashe, Ryan White, et cetera, and there was no test for it. And that is how the HIV got introduced into the United States through the Haitian Congo phenomena. Forward to nowadays, guess what, folks? The HIV virus is now more resistant. The virus is still the number one threat to Black females in the United States. What do I mean by that? Well, folks, we have to understand that the masculinity of Black men is a misnomer. There are a lot of Black gay men that are spreading this disease in Atlanta. Guys are in prison, getting out and having sex with the Black female and not being tested. The reality, folks, is that what we're seeing now, and what I have a concern about, is now I'm seeing cases of HIV in 13-year-old kids now, Black kids that are being affected, and that Black boy is having sex with that Black man, and that Black
boy goes to the elementary school and has sex with that girl across the street and spread the virus. And guess what? There's no testing. They don't know about it. And then the virus gets endemic. It gets circulated. And the virus continues to do what it does. And it causes a impact on our society. And so when I talk about HIV and AIDS, this is a significant threat because we have to make sure that we're doing the education and the testing and making sure that people understand that it's not about, a stigma or putting down a people. It is a certain practice that has to be modified, or the kids have to be protected because HIV is causing such a huge impact on Black society, i.e. Black HIV infections have passed white gay men. Black females are number 2. And what's happening? Well, the Black man's coming home from prison or whatever the case is, affecting the female, and the female takes the brunt of it. And then in reality, the vicious cycle continues to happen. So when we talk about HIV, we need to make sure that we understand as a people that we need to make sure that we continue to educate. We need to make sure that we continue to testing. And I want to make sure that people understand once you get the HIV virus, folks, you have it the rest of your life. You never get rid of it. The HIV has a tropism for what I said earlier, the CD4 cells. It gets inside the CD4 cells. The virus can live up to 15 years. The virus slowly kills that CD4 cell. That CD4 cell is responsible, it's why it's called the helper cell, it's responsible for turning on the immune system, helping augment the whole orchestra of the immune system to help fight infection. Well, guess what? If you have a CD4 cells that are working, you have no infection. Once the CD4 cells start to die, guess what happens, folks? You start having increased opportunist infection. We've done the studies. People have up to 20 different infections from an HIV opportunist infection, i.e. they have 5 meningitis from 5 different viruses, gastrointestinal diseases, Kaposi sarcoma, skin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It does not change. I just saw 10 HIV patients just 3 weeks ago. And what I'm seeing now is another offshoot of a disease called monkeypox. And now we're starting seeing just monkeypox. We're also seeing syphilis. And so now we're making that relationship back again. HIV, monkeypox, and syphilis kind of go hand in hand. And so that's why it's so important that now that we have to have, since we're in this educational mode and people talking about the society, we have to make sure that we are testing, and making sure that the kids are being educated. And in particular, Black females are screened on a regular basis, make sure that they're not HIV infected, because that will change your life. So it's very, very, very important on the HIV phenomenon. And I could go on forever and ever about HIV, but I think the basic point is that we need to make sure that we're protecting our people. And in cities like Houston, Atlanta, New York, Chicago, LA, that testing has to be done on a regular basis, or not, HIV is going to really have a significant impact on our next generation, especially to our children. Now, some people have asked the question, Dr. Rowland, all these new anti-HIV medication, and guess what? I cannot detect the HIV virus at all in my body, which means I can go out and have sex. Well, make sure you have protected sex. And here's the deal, folks, that's going to blow a lot of people's mind away. When you get infected with the HIV virus, 90% of the virus themselves go to work. They go inside the CD4 cells and they cause infection. 10% of them viruses, guess what, folks? They go to your brain. They go to sleep. And they stay asleep for about 10 years until the other 90% of the virus are tired of working and they come back out. So a person that gets HIV never, ever gets rid of the HIV virus. It's impossible. It would not happen in a million years, because this virus is very, very smart. And it's very smart because it lives into one of the immune cells that is responsible for immunity, which is the CD4 cells. So it's very important that people need to understand that. especially people that have these different sexual practices and stuff. Make sure you're doing the right thing, because it's not fair. And I've seen cases, broke my heart. A lady that I had to take care of 3 weeks ago, husband was funny, and she ended up being HIV positive and ended up with syphilis. It's just a horrific case. And you try to figure out the mental aspects of this. That why not just do the right thing? And the right thing sometimes is not about you, it's about protecting the other people in this case. And especially when it comes to our children, we need to make sure that we are educating our children about the effects of HIV, in particular Black Americans, because it is a very, very detrimental to our society and to our kids and stuff, and very, very important stuff like that. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up for any questions on HIV. Go for it.
And Dr. Rowling, thank you for that, for breaking that down, because it is a very critical thing that everyone wants to talk about COVID right now, right? Because that's the that's the hot topic. Yeah, let's just stick on COVID. No. You have to know. We have to go back to the biggest elephant in the community, which are STDs. They are worse than anything else. And you brought up HIV, which is critical, because that's something that we need to look at. HIV/AIDS, how it started in the progression, everything. But I wanted to mention this. When I was in Atlanta last week, when I was doing a presentation on the next pandemic, and then a few hours after that, I did a full presentation on Marcus Garvey. And I brought up the fact that there was an explosion of STDs in Atlanta.
Right.
And that was it's a hush hush type of deal. Don't talk about it. Atlanta is like the new Black Mecca. It's blowing up. A lot of Black owned businesses are making a lot of money. That's okay. That's true. It's happening. All that is happening too. Two of these things can be true at the same time. The problem is, I mentioned this and I just brought this point up, and you being an infectious disease expert, you can let me know if I'm wrong or if I'm off base here. But if the CDC is located in Atlanta, Georgia, and the CDC is supposedly producing or helping to produce the science for vaccines, why isn't Atlanta the healthiest place on earth?
Because it's not morally correct, period. That's just the CDC. And the reality is that when you're talking HIV and the infection rate in Atlanta is a mecca for a different type of lifestyle. That's just a fact. And the reality is, I warn people, when you go to Atlanta, one thing that we're seeing with HIV patients that I saw very consistently 3 weeks ago is HIV and monkeypox go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the restaurants in Atlanta, or you're in your club in Atlanta, you got people that got lesions on their face and their hands. That's somebody you need to run away for very quickly. Why? Because monkeypox is now endemic here in the United States, folks. Monkeypox is a very notorious virus, part of the pox virus family, smallpox. But this is a DNA virus, which means it's sturdy. It can sustain itself, i.e., it can live on your toilet for 30 days. We found it in hospital sheets for 30 days. It can live on wheelchairs. It can live on the table for 30 days. The virus is very resistant. If somebody comes by you that has monkeypox, you can catch it in the air, period. So monkeypox, HIV, Atlanta is the central hot zone for that. And this is the gateway to trying to decrease the amount of HIV and monkeypox transmission. And you were absolutely correct. You saw in your own eyes what's happened in Atlanta, and you're correct. The CDC should be putting out information, but guess what? It is not good business if your city is known as the HIV capital and monkeypox in the United States and world.
That's right. That's right. And also for those who heard what Dr. Rowling said maybe about 10 minutes ago, where he mentioned those who were saying, well, I'm not detectable. My HIV is not detectable. Have you been seeing these commercials? Some of y'all have Tubi, some of you have Netflix, some of you have whatever one of these apps to watch movies on. They have been touting, I'm talking about bragging about drugs. This is the new pathway, right? Pharmaceutical companies are now pushing drugs that don't cure anything, they never did, but don't cure, hell, don't even really manage or help. They're pushing drugs that simply make your disease undetectable. Doesn't mean you don't have it, you have it, but it doesn't show up on a test, which means you're out there spreading it, but it doesn't pop up as positive on a test. I'm letting y'all know this. It's one of them is called PrEP, is one of them. Right.
Yes.
I think it's Truvada for PrEP, or that's one of them. And they have mainly Black folks on these commercials, mainly Black gay men.
Yeah, excuse me. I watched the commercial last night, and these black dudes are kissing each other, and they are all having ball in some party. You know, HIV. Hell, won't they just do a commercial? Me and my wife like that about us being in love, but they're pumping this narrative, and the narrative is going to get a lot of people killed because the reality, the HIV virus is still in your brain on the science part of it, and who would want to take a chance of a possibility that you still can be infected? So don't buy the hype. And that's that pixie dust in the seven dwarfs type of mentality.
Exactly. Be careful, y'all.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
That's my point. Y'all be careful. Now, Kun, I'll go ahead. I'll turn it over to you for questions, but y'all be very careful, please, because the goal is to take us out through viruses. That's the goal. And now they're doing it in a way where they release certain things, and now we pass it to each other willingly. We have to increase in our discipline and our health and really taking things serious, because right now it's getting bad. Go ahead.
Let me add one more thing too, because in my experience as an infectious disease specialist, and I've done the viral load and understanding the transmission of HIV in patients, i.e. we give you retroviral medication, but we have to see if that medication works. I've had the opportunity to do big time PCR and measure if the medication is working. And when the medication is working, we see a decrease in the viral load in HIV patients. If the medication doesn't work, we see an increase. Well, guess what, folks? We're seeing resistant HIV now. And now we're seeing people not just with HIV, they have resistant HIV, not just HIV-1, they also have a combination of HIV-1 and HIV-2. So you can imagine somebody in Peru having sex with somebody in New York City, somebody in Africa having sex with somebody in the UK. This is the global pandemic that we still need to be worried about, because there are so many people in Africa that are still infected with HIV. And here in the United States, it is one of the leading causes of morbidity and mortality among young Black males in between the ages of 13 to 35. Period. Fact.
Be safe, brothers. Go ahead, Akuna.
All right, so a lot of people are asking about the possible link between HIV and COVID-19 vaccine. They are asking, if someone took the vaccine, do they need to get tested for HIV periodically? Also, are there HIV proteins in the vaccines?
Well, that's a good question. I would say you should be tested on HIV just to be tested. But the question that you have to ask yourself is that when you look at an HIV person, folks, they're already by definition immunocompromised. So you got somebody immunocompromised and you give them a vaccine, it's going to make them more immunocompromised, more subject to the complication of a vaccine like that. That is why they've already done the studies, immunocompromised patients that have organ transplants or people on chemotherapy, and people got the vaccine. There was no change in their neutralizing antibodies. They did not change their antibody levels to get to a protective level. So if you look at somebody's HIV compromised, why would you inject them with a vaccine that will increase or make the possibility of a complication even worse and stuff, because they're already immunocompromised. In fact, if you're already immunocompromised, what are you giving somebody a vaccine for? Because you have no immune system to boost up anything, which goes against the logic once again. So that's why it's so important that as people go down the road of vaccines and understanding vaccines in children, trust me and Riz, they beat me up telling me I was anti-vax. I'm not anti-vax. I love vaccines. In fact, I go to the jungles and give children all types of childhood vaccines. But this vaccine would not touch one of my grandchildren. I am not on the bus for this one. And that's why it's so important for every parent out here nowadays looking at your childhood vaccines or vaccines. You need to make sure you understand the ingredients in them. Is that a messenger RNA vaccine? Or is that the old traditional vaccine that we were getting when I was a kid, and a kid in elementary school? So you guys got to make sure that you guys do your homework. And like I always said, do not drink the Kool-Aid, because the Kool-Aid does not have any sugar. And once you drink that Kool-Aid, boy, it better taste good.
Very
Thank
critical.
you. Another question is, can HIV turn into some cancers like liver, kidney cancer, etc.?
Yeah, That's it. Well, HIV is, any virus can turn into a cancer, but in the hallmark of HIV in its infection, we do see more skin cancers, Kaposi sarcoma. We see more cancers of the arterial system. And so, yes, 100%. HIV is a cosmopolitan of multitude of different diseases, an opportunist infection. That is why when I was looking at patient 3 weeks ago, I had a patient that had a CD4 count of 50. Well, this person was in a semi-coma with a fungal infection in the brain, had cytomegalovirus in the brain. They had a fungal infection in the lungs, a fungal infection in the liver, bacterial infection everywhere. Folks, you don't mess around with HIV because it is a very opportunist infection. You can have everything from bacterial infection, fungal infection, parasitic infection, cancer infection. And that is why we look at an HIV patient, back in the day, these guys were like 70 pounds because they're shitting, 5 and 10 liters of feces every day from chronic diarrhea, from the parasites that they have, the cryptosporiosis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a disease that has a multitude, but cancer, absolutely.
And really quick to touch on that really quick, a lot of studies are coming out now from those who took the COVID shot, right?
Right.
And they are now looking at the results. Many of the studies that were conducted on mice that they gave the shot to, they are developing turbo cancers, what they're now referring to it as, the turbo cancers, as a result of those who took the shot. This is a very critical point that, again, everyone has their own individual susceptibility, their own strength of immunity. Everyone has their own individual level of chemistry. So what affects Dr. Rowley may not affect me. What affects me may not affect him the same way. This is why you cannot mass vaccinate during a pandemic, because you have no idea how it's going to affect so many different people with so many different types of chemistry. So that is also something for those who may not know yet.
Yeah, it's very critical. And like we talked about, when we look at the COVID and vaccination, we have not just the phenomena of the complications that nobody wants to talk about, the myocarditis of the heart, pericarditis, gastrointestinal tract, menstrual problems. But one of the biggest things that I talked about earlier, almost 2 years ago, is the reactivation of cancers. And some of these folks, I'm talking some of the top oncologists, some of the top oncologists in the world got the vaccine. They had full metastasis of cancer within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Died. So reactivation of cancers, reactivation of shingles, reactivation of diseases. That is why it's so important that everybody needs to make sure they read the fine print on informed consent. That is the nature of what vaccines can do. Vaccines can induce cancers, can induce reactivation of certain diseases in certain individuals. And I have several people I'm dealing with now that have paralysis of their face from the COVID vaccine. So these are some of the complications that people need to always make sure they understand. Other questions?
All right, so some people are bringing up Magic Johnson and they're wondering how he was able to cure his HIV.
Well,
And
Magic
Okay.
did not cure his HIV. Magic Johnson was a very fortunate individual that had plenty of money to take all the antibiotics and all the drugs that he needed to make sure he did what he did versus a lot of people. In fact, when you look at how Magic Johnson got HIV, there's a big misnomer out there. Magic Johnson did not get HIV from some female. He got it from having sexual intercourse with other men. That's just a lifestyle that these guys had back in them days and stuff. That is the reality. The odds of a female giving HIV infection to a man is like you winning the lottery. It's not going to happen. But a man having sexual intercourse of another man with ejaculating sperm viruses into your rectum is a 100% infection rate. Let me explain what I mean. In medicine, if we cannot get the IV medication in your arm, folks, guess where we put the medication at?
Suppository.
Or we put it into your bone marrow. That is the straight fact. That is not an illusion. That is why it's so important that as we navigate
that people stop trying to do a narrative. My son dropped dead on the basketball court and they had a congenital defect. Really, right. The reality is what it is what it is. And they do a disservice to people when they do not tell the truth. If you're going to be in this public space out here touting something, you need to make sure you tout it 100%. You don't get to do 50%. You tell people to get a vaccine and something happens, you better follow through. You don't get to tell the narrative to make people think a different way. That is why we're where we're at today. The reality. Infectious disease 101.
Thank you. And this is a very similar question, but more specific. People are bringing up Dr. Sebi and how he had claimed that he had cured AIDS and or HIV, and they want to know your take on that.
Well, there's no cure for HIV. It's never going to happen in 1,000 years, folks. I'm sorry. Once that virus gets inside your body, let's go again. We talked about it earlier on how viruses work. You get infected with the virus. The virus has tropism. The virus likes the CD4 cell. Well, once the virus is in the cell, how do you get rid of the virus inside the cell? One, well, you can kill yourself. Two, there's no chemicals that will go across that cell to kill that. That is why when we talk about chemotherapy, people don't realize when you get chemotherapy, what are you doing? You're killing not just the good cells, you're killing the bad cells and hope you have enough reserve to be able to survive that. So once a virus gets inside that cell, that virus is inside that cell. And the only way you're going to get rid of that virus is to kill that cell, which is killing you. And better yet, when we look at tuberculosis, which is another part of the HIV phenomena, the tuberculosis lives inside the macrophages in your lungs, which are responsible for infections. How are you going to kill the tuberculosis parasite bacterium that's in the macrophages? By what you do is you take a bunch of chemicals to try to eradicate that. But most pathogens that are smart go intracellular, which means they live inside the cell. And that is why it's so important to understanding CD4 cells and T helper cells. And when it comes to HIV, once that virus is in that helper cells, it is there, gone inside the cell, there forever. And plus, it goes into your brain. So whatever medication you have has to have the ability to go over the blood-brain barrier, and you're killing your brain cells again. So this is the reality, folks. I'm sorry that this is out there. I've only been around for, so many years.
Absolutely. And let me just add on that really quick. For those bringing up Dr. Sebi, the very critical point that you want to know when it comes to brother Dr. Sebi, and not just Dr. Sebi, but anyone dealing in the area of naturopathy, who's dealing in the herbalist area, etc. Fasting as it pertains to cellular health, cellular regeneration, and overall detoxification of the body is one of the most critical things as it pertains to detoxing, period. That is one of the original, is one of the most ancient, it is one of the most natural, depriving your body of the food and water so that it can go into a period where it heals itself. Sometimes, we don't really even realize, most of us who didn't know about the immune system, where the majority of it takes place in the gut, in the stomach, in the intestines, and right. Most of us didn't even know that part. That's 10th grade biology where they teach us that. But when you deprive your body of all of these different things and just say, I'm not going to eat, I'm just going to do water, or something similar like that, then you give your body a time to rest. Then it can restore the cells. Then it gets rid of the fats and the unneeded sugars and all of those different chemicals, and it starts to detoxify. Then it starts to replenish those cells and go into a form of reconstruction. So Dr. Sebi heavily relied on. I'm sorry, Dr. Rowland, you're muted. Were you saying something?
No,
okay.
I'm just agreeing with what you're saying.
Oh, I got you. Okay, got you. So yeah, that's something that people want to look at when it comes to Dr. Sebi and anyone who talks about fasting. That's the most critical thing that Dr. Sebi worked, along with herbs, but fasting is something we need to understand.
Let me explain something to folks out here too. I know we almost have 2,000 people on this call. Mm-hmm. when we talk about medicine and science, I always tell my students there's tropical medicine and traditional medicine. Most traditional medicine came from tropical medicine. Now, there is a role for the shamans I work with in the Amazon jungle. They've been doing it for 5,000 years. There are plants out there that are responsible for helping with antibodies. Plants do not have an immune system. They produce chemicals. And so these chemicals, these teas that people drink, they work. I've seen it work in the jungles, working with shamans that have passed this stuff down for thousands of years. There's a role for both, but there's a role for both, and do not count one out the other. Now, I've heard on Clubhouse where me and you, we need to go back on Clubhouse because they ripped me and you. They got these idiots out there, fools that are telling me and people, you do an enema, they've gotten rid of breast cancer. They do an enema, they gotten rid of cancer. They've done an enema and they gotten rid of HIV. Man, what in the hell world are you living in, man? I mean, this is the stupid stuff out there that I've heard, and I'm trying to save people's lives and they're arguing with me. I'm talking about, really? So I can take a shit, an enema, and I can get rid of all my disease? I don't think so.
This is where scientists start banging, y'all. It's a different world now. It does happen. In the name of helping the people, it does happen. But the reality is, again, I'm thankful, Dr. Rowland, for you taking this time to answer these questions, because these are things that people really have these questions, right? And they don't have the right people to ask these questions to pose them to. They get either somebody who just wants to sell something to them, or they get somebody to say, look, just take what pharmaceutical companies give you, or just do this, just do that. But they don't get a full, honest conversation with people who have the degrees. They don't get a full, honest overall conversation. So that's why, again, I just thank you for taking your time. Yeah.
I want to thank you, but what we need to do, like you said earlier, we need to have that big 2,000 people conference in LA.
Yep.
On the stage, talking about diseases for the people, that people can see me and you real time. And hey, Dr. Rowland, answer that question, because we need to have that, because other people are doing the narrative.
Yes.
Narrative has been wrong. It's taken the bus and driven the bus off the cliff. And a lot of people have gotten injured. And at the end of the day, it's about the reality of dealing with diseases. And one of the things I have to say, you're not going to argue with me about the books. You might come up with, maybe you don't like me because my smile or the way my eyes look, but do not come talk to me about science, because you're going to get blown away. You're out of your depth. And that's the reality. What you bring is that real life information. I bring that real life. But the most important thing is that we bring human compassion, because we have a love for our fellow mankind at the end of the day.
That's a fact. That is a fact. And y'all, and just again, for those who are tuning in right now, yes, that is something that is going to happen. In LA, I will be doing that. I purposely have not held pretty much any event. I have not put on an event in LA in roughly maybe 3.5 years, because of the whole COVID circumstance and how the government was targeting me. And so they were preventing certain things from happening. So I had to wait until a certain point. Now I'm getting ready to bring some of the top scientists together to push the actual facts, the science and the truth, the way Fauci was touring the country, pushing the lies, and his pharmaceutically sponsored cronies were pushing the lies. Dr. Rowland will be one of those scientists. We're going to have Dr. Christina Parks. We got some scientists who used to work under Fauci, who came out under whistleblower status. We got some heavy hitters, and they are going to be on that stage presenting the truth. And we'll see, we're going to bring out the invitation to those from UCLA, scientists from UCLA and others who would like to possibly debate. We will open that up for them. But the point is, you, the people, have to get that truth live and in person, so that you can ask questions in front of everybody and get the actual facts finally, so that you can say, I was told the truth from the most qualified people, who actually cared about me, and didn't just try to, sell me some damn vaccine as the ultimate solution. So again, I appreciate that, Dr. Rowland. Are there any more questions? I think, was that the last part of your presentation then?
No, I was going to just end it up with just a summary of what we kind of talked about, and the reality that at the end of the day, folks, the reality is that the information that I've given you tonight, I hope you are able to take this information and be able to articulate that into your lives. Since the beginning of the COVID situation, I've always been an advocate of saving people's lives, and it's not about me, it's about our fellow man. And that's why I've worked in the Amazon jungle for 25 years, nominated Humanitarian of the World, Global Humanitarian of the World, because I love mankind. Even though mankind is a crazy creature, I can't stand them sometimes. That's why I love the children the most. But at the end of the day, I prepared myself my whole entire life, which comes down to one thing: microbiology and infectious diseases. This is what I do very, very well. Stephen Curry can shoot a basketball all day. Well, I can shoot a virus all day, and that's the reality. And it's very important as you folks navigate in this next pandemic, because it's here, folks. Endemic here. You're looking at television now. They're closed down Morris Brown College. Spelman's College is next. Atlanta's a hot zone again. The COVID, now you're seeing articles coming out now. The CDC is even saying that the vaccines don't work against these mutations. We already knew that, folks. And you need to make sure you have the best information to be able to protect your family. And like I always say, we're here to take care of Big Mama. And what happens is the system and certain individuals, i.e. the Roland Martins, have thrown you and your Big Mama under the bus for some coins and for whatever purposes they had. And the reality, folks, is that it's been a game changer and people have suffered. We're going to see more cases of people having heart problems. If I can give recommendation right now for folks that have had the COVID vaccine, especially young folks, go get a cardiac workup. What's the harm? Know what your heart status is. Get your lab work up, because when you're dead, you're gone. You're a footnote and nobody's thinking about you. And this is the reality. The Faucis in the world do not care about you. They're not home dealing with your mother that has a stroke. They're not changing Big Mama's diaper that she's soiled in. They're not feeding Uncle John in a wheelchair or getting Bobby to the hospital. These folks have no value interest in your life. You make sure that you guys are dealing with people that have a genuine sincerity about taking care of your humanity, about you. If you're going to go down a certain road, you own it. And some folks in this world have a habit of trying to skate uphill on ice, and it doesn't work very well. They fall down. So make sure that you're dealing with people that are credible, that have a genuine care for you and your health and your people, and trying to educate you every day. I hope you have the opportunity to follow me on Instagram at Dr. Rolling, because every day I'm putting out some type of information on something in the world. It could be a monkeypox, cholera, you name it, I'm talking about it. And what I want you folks to also understand, what's going to drive the next pandemic, and I'm sorry to say this, is these illegal immigrants, folks. I've talked about this before. Now we're seeing cases of malaria in New Jersey. We're seeing dengue in Alabama, in Florida. Folks, you have to understand, when you bring a migration of people here, and I've worked in these countries, in these environments, you have to screen these people for diseases, period. What world do you let somebody that has multi-drug resistant tuberculosis in the streets of New York or LA? Just think about that. Peeing on the sidewalk, pooping on the sidewalk. Folks, this is another threat that we're going to have to deal with, where we're going to have to screen these folks, because we're going to have much, much more disease burden. And when you start seeing malaria in the United States, that tells me, dengue, it tells me that somebody came across the border, they had the dengue virus in their body, or they had the malaria parasite in their body. That mosquito in Alabama, Florida took a bite of that individual, took that parasite into that mosquito, and it activated what we call trans-ovarian transmission of the virus vector disease. And all the baby mosquitoes are infected with dengue. And one of the things I'm looking forward to over the next 6 months with my lab here in Little Rock is to take mosquitoes here in Alabama and Texas and also in Arkansas and examine them for malaria. We do that. Look for dengue and see how this disease is spreading, or these viruses are spreading and diseases are spreading across the country. And for you folks in New York, be careful about cholera, because they're pooping and peeing everywhere. And cholera was introduced into Haiti from Bangladesh when the soldiers came over there. So trust me, cholera is going to be the next big things that we're going to see bacterial diseases where you're going to see people pooping 15 liters of feces every day and dying from cholera here in America if we don't be careful. And so anything else? Any other questions?
So, and Dr. Rowling, so I know you're examining mosquitoes in your lab, but you're not weaponizing them like Bill Gates, right?
No, Bill Gates is an absolutely joke and absolute farce. Somebody with a bunch of money with no credibility. And it's a shame that our society worship people like that. And and that's where we make our mistake at. And one thing that I want to say is that we need to stop being Black folks need to realize that the Roland Martins don't speak for Black folks, period. I don't know why the society, the government goes to some Black dude like that. He's supposed to speak for you, me, and everybody, and that's it. And we're supposed to get in tow. We are very independent people with different viewpoints in life, and one Black folk doesn't speak for Black folks. The only person that could probably really do that was Muhammad, and also guess who? Martin Luther King. That is it. The rest of these folks are all what I call pimpsters and frosters.
That's a fact. That is a fact. Well, my brother, I definitely appreciate you, everybody. I want you to give your virtual clap to our brother. Really quick, Acuna, if you can put up, I want y'all to know this. I have my private exclusive group called the Free Thinkers. This is those who I meet with virtually every week. I present all of the experts, the information that Dr. Rowling has presented, along with a laundry list of other experts in different areas, okay, who present this information. You get all of that. You get, you're the ones who get the podcast before anybody else get them, and a whole lot of other things. Scan this code here with your phone, or if you're on your phone, click the link that is in the caption, or probably the link that's in the chat right here. And that way you can join the Free Thinkers if you want to be a part of that group, because that is where we get involved in these things. We get involved in community work. We get involved in not only exchanging the information, but also solutions. There's a lot that you get that I can't put out publicly. And as Dr. Rowling already knows, because the whole pandemic is pushing up again, they're doing the censorship is going to come after that. And you already know what's going to happen. Brother Reza Islam will continue to be censored. You know how this is going to go. So I was able to find, yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, one thing I want to say to everybody, I want to thank everybody for having me on this program, and I hope you learned a lot. But I want all you guys to go and get the children's STEM book about Mommy or Virus is Smart. I think that is so important for the children to understand how infectious diseases are transmitted. And this children's book, written by Michelle Cox, is a book that talks about the 7 F's. Mommy, how you wash your hands, the whole 9 yards. And so I'm looking forward to changing children's lives by introducing them to science at an earlier age. And please support our book called Mommy or Virus is Smart by Michelle Cox, and is our website at www.tapedabiosecurity.com.
Absolutely. And that link is going to be right there in the chat for those asking. Please make sure you do that, because children need to know. They have to know all the basics, but this is something that they have to know, because, put it this way, they're being bombarded with the lies on a daily basis. So they have to be given the truth on the other end. Y'all know how this goes. All right. They're pushing you in schools. Hey, children. Hey, kids. You know, I say, don't you want to get your shot? They dancing in front of them, giving them candy, doing all the creepy pedophile type stuff to tell children, come get your shot. It is insane. So we have to educate our children. And on the other hand, I will say this as well. Many of you are going to have to consider homeschooling.
Yes.
You're going to have to consider homeschooling, because they are going to push all the things that they already push. And by the way, there is the link to the book in the chat. So make sure you grab that book. Please support and get that information, because it supports yourself, your family, Black families, our people, and people all over the world. Make sure you get that. But they're going to be pushing everything like they already pushed the gender ideology, that insanity, but they're also pushing the vaccines onto the children's minds all day. Then they're also making it legal to where the children will be able to receive these shots without parental consent. That is a very wicked thing that you have to look out for. I'm letting you know right now, so that when it hits you, you know, you can know, okay, I was already warned about this. So just be mindful that homeschooling or private schooling that is religious based or a private organization based that doesn't mandate shots may be something you want to consider. Just letting you know that now for those who are parents or who are going to be future parents.
I think that's very important, especially when it comes to schooling, but we have to make sure that as this topic is infectious diseases on how it affects the Black American, well, that Black Americans are children too. They
Yep.
are our generation. We've already gone through the period of no school. Generations are behind. We have more stress, more mental health issues. So we have to get back to the basics and making sure that our children are healthy mentally. And that includes programs like you're saying, home education, reading STEM books, because we need future doctors, we need future scientists. We have to have that, folks. So please make sure that in your neighborhood, that you're out there making sure that you're taking care of the children, which is our generations to come, to be able to take care of us, because they are being influenced in a lot of negative ways. It's not about Oreo cookies anymore. It's about whatever the agenda they're trying to push, and it's not right. And I'm going to do my best to make sure I'm able to be a positive role model for all our Black children, and then children just general around the world. And so please read our STEM book, Miami, Our Virus is Smart, because we're going to have a bunch of more STEM books coming out for children, especially Black children that look like us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, my brother. All right, y'all. I think that is it. Make sure you go to RizaIslam.com. Give our brother a round of applause again.
And give Acuna, I want to give Acuna a shout out, the person
Yes.
behind the scene. Acuna, I thank you very much. I look forward to working with you for the next 10 years. You're super fantastic, because people never see the person behind the scene. And
That's
you've done
fact.
a 50% job to have me and Rez do our thing, but we wouldn't be able to do that without you. So thank you very much. I look forward to working with you for further projects and down the road.
That's a fact. Y'all always support the people that support you, especially those that put on these slides, put together all of this work. Acuna, you already know what it is. We appreciate you, sis. Make sure you support your team, family. I think that's it. Go to RizaIslam.com, grab your Natural Immunity shirt, grab your book. Make sure, all right, brother. Good to see you again.
I'll see you on the IG. I'll see everybody on the IG. Hey, keep supporting us, because I'm going to keep bringing it. I'm bringing the heat.
Absolutely. And we're going to email Dr. Rolling's email to you all, for those of you who have those questions and follow-ups for him. We're going to send his email to your email that you received this link in. So look forward to that. Also, you will be receiving a recording of this presentation so that you can watch it with your family later, whoever else, missed it, etc. We're also going to send some solutions and other things that y'all may need. Appreciate y'all. May Allah bless you. Have a good night. Yes, sir.
Take care, man. We'll talk later, man. Bye-bye.
All right, my brother.